She buttered her toast like she was painting a canvas. Careful, delicate strokes. Not a single glance in my direction. And then, without even clearing her throat, she said the sentence that cleaved the last 28 years of my life clean in half. I'm moving in with Dennis. No build-up. No remorse. Just toast, marmalade, and a knife slicing through routine like it meant nothing. I looked up from my eggs, still mid-bite. The yolk broke, spreading a thin yellow film across my plate. Dennis, I repeated slowly, just to taste the syllables. Your boss. She didn't flinch. Well, technically, he's VP now. Got promoted last week. I didn't want to tell you until it was certain. She placed the knife down with surgical precision, then reached for her coffee. Her nails were freshly done. Red, too red for a Thursday morning. Her lipstick matched. Too much effort for someone who claimed she was just going to the office. I noticed it earlier. Filed it away. Now it made sense. I see, I said. That's all I gave her. 2 words. Not a curse, not a scream, not even a raised brow. I just pushed my plate slightly forward and leaned back in the chair, taking her in like a curious exhibit. She waited. Expected something more. Fire, maybe. Tears, ideally. A scene to validate her drama. But I didn't hand it to her. You're not going to say anything? She asked, tone sharpened with confusion. That smug smile that had crept up the side of her mouth started to twitch. The corners trembled. Still there, but unstable. You've made your choice, I said. I respect that. She scoffed. Scoffed. Like I was the unreasonable one. Oh, Harold, she sighed, standing up and brushing non-existent crumbs off her blouse. You always were so composed. It's part of the problem, really. Always acting like a rock. Never passionate. Never daring. Life's too short for comfort. Is that what Dennis gives you? Passion. She looked me dead in the eye. He makes me feel alive. Something you haven't done in years. That one stung. Not because it was true. Hell, she and I hadn't been close in a decade. But because she said it with such smug confidence. Like she'd just dropped a poetic truth, unaware she was quoting a discount paperback novel sold near airport bathrooms. I smiled then. Just a little. The kind of smile you give when you know a storm's coming, and someone else just threw away their umbrella. She mistook it for pain. Her smirk returned. I'll be by this weekend to grab my things, she said, already checking her phone. Don't make it hard, okay? Let's stay civil. Of course. Oh, and don't call me. I think it's best we both move on. Fair enough, I said, standing and grabbing my jacket. I hope Dennis likes marmalade. She paused, brows scrunching. What? Nothing, I said, heading for the garage. Just curious how long it'll take him to notice you never buy the same jar twice. It's always about variety with you. She blinked. For a flicker of a second, her smile faltered again. She opened her mouth, probably to retort, but I was already walking away. Behind me, I heard the clink of her cup hitting the sink a little too hard. In the garage, I sat in the truck for a moment before turning the ignition. I didn't feel anger. Not yet. Just a stillness. Like something ancient had shifted inside me. Like a gear that hadn't moved in years just clicked back into place. Her leaving wasn't the collapse she thought it'd be. It was the clearance sale before a grand reopening. The part where the dead would get cleared and something leaner, meaner, and infinitely more focused rises in its place. She thought I'd beg. That was her first mistake. She thought she knew me. That was her second. And as I backed out of the driveway and watched her silhouette through the kitchen window, I had the first clear thought I'd had in years. Let the games begin. By the time I got back from the hardware store the next morning, the living room looked like a staged crime scene. Only the blood was replaced by empty picture frames and the hollow echo of absence. She'd taken half of everything. Not the sentimental half, mind you, that stayed behind like a taunt. Our wedding photo was still on the mantle, but the silver frame her mother gave us? Gone. She left the couch, but took the cushions. Kept the bed frame, but stripped it bare. It wasn't division, it was psychological warfare. And the note she left? Didn't want to argue. Took only what I brought in. Margaret never brought in a damn recliner. That was a Father's Day gift from my son. She didn't buy the coffee table. That was a weekend project I built during one of her spa retreats. And the blender? She hadn't cooked a meal in that house in 3 years. I found my favorite fishing pole leaning against the back door, snapped clean in half. Accident. I'm sure. By noon, word had spread. The small-town whisper network moved faster than broadband. I stopped by Jansen's Hardware, and the clerk gave me a look like I'd just been diagnosed. Didn't ask how I was. Just said, "That's rough, man," and handed me my paint thinner without making eye contact. At the grocery store, Mrs. Leary from down the street accidentally left her cart blocking my aisle. Twice. I'd known her for 20 years. Now I was radioactive. Like heartbreak was catching. What stung the most wasn't the silence, it was the side glances. The half-smiles. The pity nods. At 5:30 sharp, I went to O'Malley's for a beer. I hadn't set foot there in almost a year. Used to be a regular when I was younger, before Margaret started using the phrase, "It's not your scene anymore." Tony was still behind the bar, still pouring pints like time hadn't touched him. He wiped his hands on a towel and said, "Well, I'll be damned. Look who the cat dragged in." "Yeah," I muttered. The cat took half the house and left the rest as a warning. He slid me a glass before I asked. "On the house." "Careful," I said. "You'll get labeled an accomplice." He laughed, but his eyes were scanning me, taking inventory, measuring the damage. "You gonna be all right?" he asked after a moment. "Always am." That's when Frank slid into the stool beside me. Old friend. We worked together back in '92, before I climbed the corporate ladder, and he slid down it face first. Always the conspiracy theorist. Always the drinker. But sharp as hell under all that sarcasm. He tilted his head and squinted at me. "So, the angel's flown the coop, huh? Looks that way." He sipped his beer, nodded. "You remember what you used to say? Enlighten me." "You always told me you didn't need to work for yourself. That you liked structure. That the security of a paycheck was freedom enough." I chuckled bitterly. "Yeah, sounded noble at the time. Not noble. Calculated." That made me pause. He tapped the side of his glass. "But now you're asking around about Archer Group? Dan Archer? That's not Harold the steady behavior. That's Harold the sleeper agent waking up after a long nap." I turned toward him. "How'd you know that?" He smirked. "Word travels. Faster than your ex-wife's U-Haul." I stared at the foam in my beer. Frank didn't know it, but he just said something that rattled me. I had always said I didn't want to run my own show. That it was too much stress, too much uncertainty. But maybe that was the lie I told myself because I had something to lose. A life I was afraid of shaking up. No? Now the snow globe had already been hurled off the mantle. "Tell me something, Frank," I said, finishing the rest of my pint. "You think a man can forget who he really is until someone slaps it back into him?" Frank lit a cigarette, despite this sign. "Not forget," he said, puffing slowly. "Just file it away. Like a will. You only open it when you're good and buried." Outside, the sky had darkened early. Rain was coming. I paid for my beer anyway, slid a 20 under the glass and nodded to Tony. On my way out, I passed a couple whispering at the corner table. The woman wore a scarf Margaret had once owned. The man looked nervous, like I might throw a punch. I didn't. I had something better than anger now. I had questions. And a locked metal box in the attic I hadn't touched since the Bush administration. The attic was exactly how I'd left it, a graveyard of half-lived lives. Just draped every surface like a warning. The overhead bulb flickered once, then surrendered. I worked by flashlight. Behind the bins of old Christmas crap and Margaret's yoga mat she never unrolled, there it was. The box. Gray. Heavy. Locked. I had to pry it open with a flathead screwdriver and a stubborn kind of determination I hadn't felt in years. The metal groaned like it didn't want to be remembered. Inside, it was all there. My fingerprints on a life I buried 17 years ago. 3 folders, 2 notebooks, and a thumb drive. That damn thumb drive. I used to keep it in my sock drawer like it was the nuclear codes. Margaret made me throw it up here when we decluttered. Said I was holding on to deadweight. She had no idea. The first folder was labeled Proprietary Routing Algorithms, Phase 1. Pages and pages of code, schematic diagrams, logistics flowcharts. My handwriting in the margins. My initials on the patent filing draft. Second folder, Vendor Agreements, Archer Group. That name hit harder than I expected. Archer Group. I hadn't thought about Dan Archer in over a decade. We started that company out of a 2-room office behind a strip mall before Dan married well and I chose stability over ambition. The third folder had a single label, scrawled in all caps, maybe never. I opened it like I was opening a coffin. Inside, early drafts of merger proposals, letters from potential investors we never followed up with, and a yellow post-it stuck to a printed email chain that read, "If we ever circle back to this, remember who owns the damn math." H. That's right. I wrote the routing software. Dan built the sales team. I was the engine. He was the face. We shook hands when I cashed out, back when Margaret and I were trying for our second kid, back when I thought predictability was the same thing as peace. I looked down at that post-it and something ancient in me growled. I took the thumb drive and slid it into my laptop. Still worked. Still encrypted. Password was the name of my old dog, Rusty. Funny how the brain remembers things you'd swear were gone. The screen lit up with files, names, numbers, stuff I hadn't thought about since Bush was still in office. But it wasn't nostalgia. It was reconnaissance. I opened a spreadsheet titled Client Retention Heat Map. Took a minute to realize what I was looking at. It was years ahead of its time. And it was mine. Dan hadn't just used the ideas. He built his entire company on them. And if Dennis's logistics firm was still using Archer as a subcontractor, which I'd heard last night from Frank, then the map I was staring at was more than nostalgia. It was leverage. I sat in the attic with the rain drumming on the roof like war drums and stared at the only folder I hadn't opened yet, one labeled Stakeholder Equity Rollout version 1.1. It showed initial ownership breakdown, 60% Dan, 40% me. There'd never been a second version. My phone sat beside me, still plugged into the wall. I'd ignored it most of the week. No voicemails from Margaret, yet. She probably assumed I was licking my wounds, maybe drinking cheap whiskey in front of daytime TV. Instead, I opened the contacts list, scrolled down to Dan Archer, and for a second, just hovered there. The number was 17 years old. Could be dead. Might be a pizza place now. But I hit call anyway. One ring. Two. Then a click. Hello. The voice was older, raspier, but still him. I didn't say my name. Just 6 words. Is Dan Archer still in business? Silence. Then, who's this? I smiled. Let's call it a ghost of opportunity. Click. I closed the box, wiped the dust off my hands, and headed downstairs, not with the walk of a man whose wife just left him, but with the walk of a man who just found the fuse to a very long, very dry trail of gunpowder. Dan Archer looked like someone who hadn't slept in 3 years and had made peace with it. Hair thinner, eyes sunken, suit a decade past fashionable. The kind of man who once knew how to command a room and now just tried to survive it. The office was smaller than I expected. Not the glass and steel fortress I remembered seeing in industry newsletters back in the day. No, this was a third-floor walk-up above a vape shop. Half the light fixtures buzzed. The receptionist's desk was unmanned. A fern in the corner had been dead long enough to fossilize. He opened the door to the conference room and paused, eyes scanning me with something like disbelief. "I'll be damned," he muttered. "Harold Simmons." "Still breathing," I said. "You look like you've aged better than this building." He laughed, dry and bitter. "Well, the building didn't bet everything on a proprietary fleet tracking model that Amazon decided to replicate and give away for free." He motioned for me to sit, but I didn't. Not yet. The air smelled like old ambition and printer ink. "I heard Archer Group hit a rough patch," I said. "That's the polite version." He poured 2 fingers of something brown into a glass and downed it in one go. Didn't offer me any. Fair enough. I read the market. He continued, staring at the wall like it owed him an apology. "Too late. We got absorbed, Harold. Not officially, but spiritually. Half our clients are gone. The ones that stayed? Barely paying." "Dennis Carroll," I said. His posture stiffened immediately. "Bingo. Yeah, him," he said, dragging a hand down his face. "Used to be just one of our mid-tier clients. Now we basically run their back-end logistics while pretending we're independent." Pretending. Dennis doesn't like subcontractors looking too desperate. Makes his board nervous. I pulled a sheet of paper from my folder and slid it across the table. His eyes flicked down, and I watched the color drain from his face. It was the original routing schematic. My code. My signature. The DNA of the entire Archer backbone. "You've been using my work this whole time," I said calmly. "Never fully rewrote it, did you?" He looked like he wanted to lie, but then he just sighed. "We upgraded the UI. Under the hood, still your engine." I sat. Slowly. Hands folded. "I'm not here to sue you, Dan. I'm here to make you a lifeline. That got his attention. What kind of lifeline? The kind that gets you out of Dennis's shadow. I'll inject capital, clean your books, restore your autonomy. And in return, he asked, already knowing, I want controlling interest. Full executive authority. You stay on as a figurehead if you want. But I make the calls. Dan looked like a man being handed a life preserver made of chains. Relief and dread in equal measure. You always said you didn't want to run your own shop, he said cautiously. I leaned in. That was before someone mistook my silence for surrender. He didn't ask about Margaret. Didn't need to. Men like Dan knew a revenge posture when they saw one. He took another sip. Slower this time. How much? He asked. I named the figure. He whistled low. You have that kind of cash lying around? I have that kind of credit. I'll move fast. My lawyer already drew up a term sheet. I handed him a red folder marked AG Acquisition Proposal. He opened it, eyes widening slightly as he skimmed. Goddamn, he muttered. This is aggressive. I don't do soft landings anymore. Dan stared at me for a long time, then looked around his office like he was seeing it for the first time. His eyes settled on a framed photo. Him, his ex-wife, 2 kids long grown. A time when this building pulsed with optimism. Now it was just haunted. He pulled a pen from his pocket. The ink dried by 4:47 p.m. By 5:12, I was back in my truck with a copy of the papers on the passenger seat and the Archer Group master passwords on a sticky note in my wallet. Dennis didn't know it yet, but a ghost just bought his heartbeat. And I wasn't done. Not even close. By Monday morning, I had full admin access to Archer's backend systems, and Dennis didn't even know he'd left the gate open. The irony was almost insulting. He trusted Archer's old infrastructure so much, he never bothered to check who actually owned it now. I kept a low profile. Didn't touch the client-side interfaces. Didn't alert the developers. I wasn't interested in stirring dust. I was interested in patterns. Quiet ones. Ugly ones. The first thing I noticed? Invoices. Dozens of them. Some stamped paid, some marked pending, but all of them wrong. Dennis's firm had been double billing vendors. Shipping fees that made no logistical sense. Fuel surcharges for electric trucks. And worst of all, 2 contracts with shell companies, one of which traced back to a P.O. box in Vegas registered under the name D. Carrollton Holdings. Creative. Almost clever. But not quite. I flagged the documents. Created a private mirror database. The kind that doesn't show up on audit trails. Quiet work, surgical. I spent 3 straight nights combing through contracts at the kitchen table, lit only by a single desk lamp and the soft, ridiculous purr of the cat Margaret left behind. Every red flag I found was another bone on the pile. Late payments to Archer. Overcharges passed on to clients. Inflated consulting fees going to no one. And yet, Dennis kept posting yacht selfies with hashtags like #GrindNeverStops. Margaret had moved in with a crook wearing a Rolex and calling it ambition. I didn't plan revenge. That's the kind of thing angry men do. No, what I built was colder, quieter, and far more effective. I called Marissa Caldwell first, a corporate lawyer I'd met 10 years ago at a sales conference. She remembered me, told me she'd heard rumors. I need to draw up a silent review clause for a hostile option, I said. She paused. And who are we targeting? Just a VP with poor math skills and too much cologne. Then I called someone I hadn't spoken to since 2006, Victor Lin, former military, now a PI who specialized in white-collar intel. The kind of guy who once dug up a CEO's offshore accounts by reverse engineering a vacation photo background. He answered in one ring. I need everything on Dennis Carroll, I said. Business, personal, especially real estate and subsidiaries. There was a click, then a pause. This personal or professional? Yes. I gave him access to the mirror database, a prepaid retainer, and a green light to get dirty. While Victor worked the shadows, I went to work on Archer's client portfolio. I started reaching out to former partners Dennis had burned, small outfits that used to swear by him, but had quietly jumped ship. I told them Archer was under new management. I offered discounts, better terms, and, most importantly, transparency. In 48 hours, I'd secured preliminary talks with 2 logistics managers who'd been looking for an exit from Dennis's preferred vendor scheme. They didn't need convincing. They needed options. I became their option. Every move I made was calculated. Every email archived. Every call recorded. This wasn't just payback. It was a corporate snare. And the bait? Dennis's own arrogance. I had the files. I had the tools. All I needed now was for him to keep being himself. Which, according to Victor's first report, wouldn't be a problem. He's been funneling petty cash into a crypto wallet under his girlfriend's name, Victor said, emailing me a screenshot of Dennis shirtless at a rooftop bar with a woman half his age and a caption that read, "My ride or die money with wings #, early retirement." The woman wasn't Margaret. Another thread to pull. Another crack forming in the shell of Dennis's little empire. The best part? He still hadn't returned any of Archer's calls. Didn't realize anything had changed. Didn't realize I had just become the man behind the curtain. And when I decided to step out from behind it, he'd wish I'd stayed quiet. Dennis slammed his office door so hard the glass rattled. Margaret was mid-sip of some overpriced green sludge when she jumped, nearly spilling it on the white leather chair she insisted they bring from her old life. 3 accounts, Dennis growled. Gone. Just like that. No calls. No meetings. No goddamn warnings. She blinked, playing dumb. What do you mean gone? I mean Blackhawk Freight, Denton Paper, and Cowridge Electronics just respectfully terminated their contracts. You know what they have in common. Margaret hesitated, then slowly shook her head. They're now working with Archer Group. Archer. That fossil of a company I thought we left behind in the dust. They couldn't deliver a Christmas card on time last year, and now suddenly they're gobbling up my clients. He paced the room like a caged animal, sweat pooling at the collar of his designer button-down. Margaret stood quietly, setting the green juice down with a shaky hand, glancing at her phone. Still nothing. No missed calls. No texts. No voicemail. Harold hadn't called. Not since the day she walked out. Not even a petty remark. No angry rant. No, I told you so. Just silence. Cold, infuriating silence. And now he was the only man not talking about Dennis behind his back. You think it's sabotage? She asked, trying to keep her tone neutral. Dennis spun toward her like she'd just confessed to setting the office on fire. Of course it's sabotage. Someone's playing chess. And I'm starting to think I've been moved into check without even realizing it. He yanked his tie loose and tossed it onto the floor like it owed him money. You think Archer has a new investor? She asked carefully. Dennis paused. They must. Dan Archer's a relic. That guy couldn't get a sandwich financed, let alone a multi-client acquisition. Margaret forced a chuckle. You've always said Dan was the type to sell his soul if it meant saving his company. He eyed her. And who the hell would buy it? That brand is dead. She didn't answer, because her brain was working overtime, and the pieces were clicking into place in ways she didn't like. The abrupt silence. The friends who'd started reaching out to Harold, not her. The golf buddy who asked her at brunch, so what's Harold working on these days? I heard he's back in the game. She'd laughed it off then. But now it wasn't funny. Dennis sat behind his desk, tapping furiously on his keyboard, trying to dig up anything on Archer's new ownership. But Harold's name didn't show up anywhere. The transaction had gone through a holding firm. The dots were all connected, just invisible to people who never bothered looking beneath the surface. Margaret opened her messages again. Scrolled through. Still nothing. She typed a draft. Hey, just wondering how you've been. Hope you're okay. She hovered over send, then deleted it. She wasn't going to beg. Not yet. Dennis stood abruptly. I'm calling a board meeting. If we don't stop this slide now, they'll start asking who's steering the damn ship. As he stormed out, Margaret walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window. Below, downtown moved like it always had, fast and different, loud. She stared down, arms crossed tightly, tapping her finger against her forearm. If this was Harold, why hadn't he gloated? Why hadn't he even flinched? Because maybe it wasn't about rage. Maybe it was something worse. Indifference. Real, sharpened indifference. And that scared her more than any shouted accusation ever could. Because if Harold had truly moved on, he wouldn't be trying to win. He'd be trying to end things. Friday, 3:42 p.m. Dennis was on the 14th hole with 2 board members and a venture capital parasite named Brad when his phone buzzed like it was trying to crawl out of his pocket. He ignored it the first time, the second, but on the third, when the screen lit up with the name Martin R. Chair, he excused himself mid-swing and nearly dropped his driver into a sand trap. "Talk to me," he barked, pacing toward the golf cart. Martin's voice was strained, corporate smooth with a tremor underneath. "Dennis, we've accepted an offer." Dennis blinked. "What offer?" "A buyout." "What the hell are you talking about?" "We're not for sale." "We are now," Martin said flatly. "It came in 3 days ago." Silent interest. "The board approved it 6-2. You didn't even loop me in?" "We were advised not to." The buyer insisted on discretion. Dennis gripped the edge of the cart like he might throttle it. "You're telling me I lost my company on a back nine?" "No. You lost it months ago when the books started bleeding and Archer took 2 of our biggest clients." Dennis opened his mouth, but Martin continued. "You'll stay on in a transitional advisory role. 6 months. Severance is generous. That's all I'm authorized to say." The line went dead. He stood there, blinking into the manicured horizon, the blue sky turning razor-sharp and uninviting. A discreet buyer? His brain raced. He called Margaret. She didn't answer. By Sunday evening, after 6 unanswered calls and a 1,000-yard stare over 2 bourbons, he finally got a response. Not from her. From a courier. A man in a navy jacket handed him a sealed folder marked, "Welcome Packet, Executive Transition." Inside, a new org chart, a meeting agenda for Monday, 9 a.m. sharp, and a memo signed by the new managing director, Harold Simmons. Dennis dropped the glass. The bourbon hit the hardwood in slow motion. Monday, 8:53 a.m. Harold was already there. Feet up, chair reclined, suit pressed, calm like he was born in that office. He'd arrived 30 minutes early, bypassed security, who'd received new protocols Friday night, and let himself in using the freshly reprogrammed keycard. Dennis stormed in, red-eyed and clammy, tie askew like he'd strangled himself with it on the way in. "You," he said, breathless. Harold didn't look up immediately. Just finished typing an email. Then, without standing, he swiveled slowly toward him. "Well," Harold said, voice silk over steel. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Dennis blinked. "You how?" "You should sit. It's going to be a long week." "You bought my company?" "No. I bought Archer. Then I bought out the holding company that owns your debt. Then I bought your company. You don't have that kind of money." "Correct. But I have the kind of credit banks give to boring old men with clean records and long patience." Dennis stepped forward, nostrils flaring. "You think you can just waltz in here and humiliate me?" Harold stood. Calmly. Slowly. Like a man unwrapping a gift. "I'm not here to humiliate you, Dennis. That would imply I'm trying to prove something. I already won. This," he gestured to the desk, the office, the building, "this is just cleanup." Dennis's lips twitched. "I'll fight it." "You already did. That's why the board replaced you." "You son of a—" Harold raised a hand. "Ah, careful. HR policies changed. No shouting. No threats. You'll find your new responsibilities outlined in the transition binder." "Oh, and your assistant now reports to me." Dennis stared at him like a man realizing the bullet already hit him 10 minutes ago, and he just hadn't bled yet. Then Harold sat back down, ice cool. "Close the door on your way out." The trap hadn't just snapped shut. It had redecorated the room. Margaret burst through the office door like a lawyer in a soap opera. Hair wild, heels clicking like gunshots on the marble. She didn't even knock. Just shoved past the stunned receptionist and charged straight into the executive suite. "What the hell is going on?" Her voice cut through the room like a cracked whip, slicing the morning meeting in half. A junior manager dropped his pen. Someone tried to look busy. Dennis flinched. Harold didn't even glance up. She took 3 sharp steps toward the desk, his desk now. Eyes locked on Harold like he'd crashed her wedding and set fire to the cake. "You weren't going to tell me?" she demanded. Harold kept typing. "You let me walk in here like an idiot? You let me—" "What the hell is this, Harold?" Finally, he hit send, closed his laptop, and looked up with the kind of expression usually reserved for funeral directors and surgeons. "Good morning, Margaret." Her breath hitched. It was the tone. Too calm. Too indifferent. That scared her more than yelling ever could. She turned to Dennis. "Why didn't you tell me?" Dennis, sweating through his collar, didn't respond. He was already halfway back to his chair, clutching a leather folder like it might sprout wings and save him. Harold stood, adjusted his cuffs, and turned to Dennis with a slow, practiced elegance. "You're relieved." Silence. A long, Excruciating silence. Someone coughed in the hallway. Dennis opened his mouth, probably to object or beg or bluff, but Harold had already turned to Margaret. "Didn't you say I was boring?" The room tilted. Margaret's face went pale. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Harold stepped forward, just close enough for his voice to drop. "Thing is," he said softly, "boring men have time, patience, clean records, long credit histories. We don't crash fast, but when we move," he let it hang, "we don't miss." She stared at him like she didn't recognize the man in front of her. Because she didn't. Not really. She'd never cared to look past the grill tongs and hardware store coupons. And now, standing in front of her, was the version of Harold she never imagined could exist. The version she'd awakened by stomping on his pride with those same heels. "You bought his company?" she whispered, voice cracking. "I bought the debt. Then the company. Then his calendar. So yes, technically, I own his time now. You did this to hurt me." Harold tilted his head. "I didn't do this to you. You were just standing too close when the hammer dropped." Dennis sank into the corner, defeated and shrinking. Margaret looked around, searching for someone to validate her outrage, but no one moved. No one spoke. Even the receptionist stood by the door, arms folded, watching like she was front row at a private execution. Margaret's voice rose again, thinner this time. "You could have just talked to me. We could have." Harold cut her off with a quiet smile. "You did talk. Remember breakfast? When you said you were moving in with a man who makes you feel alive." She winced. He leaned in slightly. "How's that working out for you?" She blinked, furious tears clinging to her lashes, jaw clenched like she wanted to scream, but had lost the script. "I suggest," Harold said calmly, turning back toward the desk, "you both use the rest of the day to reflect." He sat. Margaret didn't move. Dennis didn't speak. Outside, the office resumed its quiet buzz. Inside, two people realized they'd just been exiled in real time. One by a man they underestimated, and one by a man they thought was long gone. Harold didn't look back as they left. He didn't need to. The door closed behind them like a steel gate slamming shut. By Wednesday, the office buzz had metastasized into full-blown legend. "Did you hear what he actually said to Dennis?" "I heard he didn't raise his voice once." Margaret? She was white as printer paper. Nobody dared say anything directly to Harold. They just nodded faster in hallways and cleared conference rooms 5 minutes early when he was scheduled to walk in. But behind doors, it was wildfire. Slack threads lit up with gifs of chess pieces falling. A group chat titled "The Simmons Sweep" quietly ballooned to 38 members. Dennis was officially blacklisted, not just from his own company, but across the entire regional network. Word spread faster than his cheap cologne. Clients he once golfed with were reassessing relationships. 2 consulting firms pulled their names from proposals. His LinkedIn banner still said "Visionary Logistics Strategist." Comments below it now ranged from "Interesting turn of events" to "Do you still offer refunds on Vision?" And Margaret? Well, Margaret became a whisper. It started small. A side glance in the elevator. A pause at the printer. Then came the laughter, never aimed directly at her, but always just loud enough to land. She tried to hold her head high, of course. Tried to pretend nothing had changed. But her energy was all wrong now. Tight. Rehearsed. Like someone holding a tray full of glassware, walking across a floor she couldn't trust. On Thursday, she approached Harold's assistant with a folder and a request for just 5 minutes. "I'm afraid he's unavailable," the assistant replied, without even looking up. Indefinitely. By Friday, Margaret was calling, then texting. "Can we talk? Just for a moment?" "I didn't know Dennis was." "You've made your point. You've won. So what now?" "Harold, please. We shared almost 3 decades. You can't just..." He didn't block her. That would have been mercy. Instead, he read each message and let it sit. Delivered. Seen. Ignored. Let the blue check marks burn like slow acid. At 2:13 a.m. on Saturday, she called 12 times in a row. By then, she'd had enough wine to convince herself she could salvage some kind of dignity. "Harold," she sobbed into his voicemail, "this isn't you. You're not this cold. You were a good man. What happened to you?" He didn't answer. Not because he didn't have words, but because her voice was no longer a summons. It was background noise. By Sunday morning, She left her sixth voicemail. This one was quieter, almost apologetic. I was wrong. About all of it. About you. I don't even recognize Dennis anymore. I don't know what I was chasing. She paused. You're not picking up, but I know you're listening. And she was right. Harold sat in his kitchen, sipping black coffee while her voice spilled from the speaker like a confession. But his expression didn't change. He didn't smile, didn't frown, because this wasn't a game to win anymore. It was a purge, a controlled burn. Let her spiral. Let Dennis rot. Let them both sit in the ash they made. Harold had reclaimed the quiet, and he wasn't giving it up for anyone. Sunday started the same way it always had, quiet, slow, deliberate. The light came through the blinds in stripes across the hardwood, and the air smelled like fresh ground coffee and spring morning. Harold stood barefoot in the kitchen, mug in hand, watching the neighbor's sprinkler sputter to life like it was fighting the will to retire. The peace was almost obscene. Then his phone buzzed. Not a ding, not a chirp, a buzz, a long, sustained vibration, like the damn thing was trying to escape the counter. Harold glanced at the screen. 185 missed calls. He raised an eyebrow. No emotion, no shock, just the quiet satisfaction of a man who already suspected the dam had cracked and now had the pleasure of watching it collapse. He picked up the phone with the same grace he'd used to flip a light switch and scrolled. Margaret. Margaret. Unknown. Dennis. Dennis. Private number. Margaret. Dennis. Voicemail X37. He tapped the first one. Dennis's voice cracked like a man whose yacht just caught fire without insurance. Harold. Look, I know we've had our issues, but this is nuclear. You've made your point, okay? You got the company. Congrats. So can we please just come to the table? I can offer equity. We can rebuild. Just call me back, man. Harold sipped his coffee. Next. Harold, I think there's some kind of misunderstanding. These contracts, this termination clause, I don't even remember signing some of this. Who the hell is Marissa Caldwell? Why is she copied on internal board memos? Next. Dennis again, his voice fraying. They're freezing my assets. Harold, please. I've got 2 mortgages, a lease on the Benz, and my girlfriend just left. She took my dog, man. Harold actually chuckled at that one. She took my dog, man. Next voicemail. Margaret this time. Harold, it's me. Again. I just wanted to say I've been thinking. A lot. About what we had. About what I threw away. I was selfish. I let Dennis fill a void that wasn't even your fault. I'm sorry. Another sip. Calm. You were always so steady. I used to say it like it was a flaw. But now? God, I miss that. I miss you. I miss us. Please call me back. Even if it's just to scream at me. She paused. I deserve it. Next. Margaret again. I saw you on the local business segment. The quiet assassin. That's what the anchor called you. I didn't know you had that in you. She exhaled. God, I never knew you at all, did I? Another message. Then another. Some crying. Some silence. One from Dennis, just wheezing into the phone like he'd sprinted into a locked door. Harold set the phone down. Let the last voicemail play into the air and dissolve like smoke. Then he picked it up. Opened Margaret's contact. Paused for half a second. Then tapped block caller. Did the same for Dennis. Then deleted both threads, texts, voicemails, the entire sorted archive. He stared out the kitchen window, the neighbor's sprinkler now reduced to a sputtering mist. A cardinal landed on the sill. The cat purred on the chair. Somewhere down the street, a lawn mower rumbled to life. Harold finished his coffee. Not triumphant. Not gloating. Just done. The war had ended. And the silence? It was exquisite. She needs a man who'll fight for her, Karen said, crossing her legs like she was on a damn talk show. I didn't blink. We were in the middle of marriage counseling, but it felt more like a trial, me as the defendant, her as the self-appointed victim, and the therapist as the poor sap stuck in between, paid to nod and scribble on a legal pad. Karen had been monologuing for 15 minutes about how I was passive, how I'd checked out emotionally, and how she needed someone who made her feel alive. She tossed in the phrase emotionally sterile like she'd just discovered it on a blog post titled Top 10 Ways to Shame Your Husband Without Technically Lying. The counselor, Dr. Neil something, looked at me with that careful, overly practiced concern. You know the type. eyebrows knit just enough to show empathy, head tilted 10 degrees like he's trying to read the fine print of your soul. Karen sat upright, smug, like she thought she'd just delivered the winning blow in a debate. I didn't speak. I just reached into the leather folder I'd brought with me and pulled out a small stack of glossy prints, perfectly aligned. I slid them across the table. No words. Neil opened the folder like it was a Pandora's box, and by the time he flipped to the third photo, I saw it, the twitch in his jaw, the sudden shift in his chair. Karen didn't look. Not at first. Her gaze was still locked on me, waiting for a rebuttal, a reaction, a plea. But I had nothing to prove. The photo showed Karen with a man she once introduced to me as a harmless coworker draped across his lap in a rooftop bar, kissing him in the back seat of a car I didn't recognize. Standing hand in hand at the edge of a beach resort I'd never been invited to. Time-stamped. Dated. Organized. Karen's face finally turned toward the stack. Her posture wilted by the second. "Oh," Neil said, finally. That was it. Just, oh. And honestly, that was enough. Karen's face drained of color as she slowly pushed the folder away, like it was something filthy. "You've been spying on me?" she whispered, switching tactics faster than a used car salesman. "No," I replied calmly. "I've been listening." The camera just helped fill in the blanks. Now, I know most people would have lost it. Raised their voice. Slammed a fist. Not me. I've been a high school principal for 26 years. You don't survive teenagers without mastering the art of letting people talk themselves into a corner, and Karen had built herself a damn mansion in one. And hey, while you're still here listening, only 2% of people listening these stories actually subscribe. If you want to help us hit our first ever 10,000 subscribers and keep the team motivated to deliver more cold-blooded drama like this, hit that button. Takes half a second, and it really helps. All right, back to the wreckage. Karen sat frozen, like someone had hit pause. I could almost hear the gears grinding behind her perfectly styled hair, trying to figure out how to spin it. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Twice. "I think," Neil finally said, clearing his throat, "we need to pause for today." I stood. Karen didn't. I looked down at her one last time. "You wanted a man who'd fight for you," I said quietly. "I fought. Just not the way you expected." And then I walked out. What she didn't know, what no one knew yet, was that this wasn't my first move. It was the middle. Karen made spaghetti that night. Her "I'm not guilty" signature dish. Chopped basil on top. Candles lit like we were newlyweds instead of a pair of aging strangers tap dancing around a minefield. She even wore that lavender blouse I used to like back when we still touched each other without flinching. "Long day?" she asked, twirling her fork like we hadn't just detonated our marriage in a therapist's office 6 hours earlier. "Eventful," I said. That was it. That was our big post-bombshell conversation. She smiled, fake and steady, like she was rehearsing for a commercial. I could practically hear the internal monologue in her head. Stay calm. Stick to the story. Control the narrative. What she didn't realize, what she'd never bothered to consider, was that I'd stopped playing this game a long time ago. I was just watching now. Not reacting. Not warning. Watching. Her phone buzzed twice during dinner. She glanced at it and flipped it face down both times. Quick fingers. Too quick for spam. Too slow for someone who has nothing to hide. Afterward, she poured herself a glass of white wine and curled up on the couch. I sat in my armchair with a crossword puzzle I had no intention of finishing. Her makeup was still on. Light, but sharper than usual. Lip gloss. She'd gotten lazy about hiding it lately, like she assumed I'd already stopped caring. And in a way, I had. But not in the way she thought. See, about 13 months earlier, I found a $118 charge on our joint credit card from a high-end boutique I'd never heard of. I'd asked casually about it. She said it was a gift for a friend's baby shower. I didn't press. I didn't even ask whose baby. But I remembered the store name. A month later, I saw a selfie of her on her lock screen, taken in the boutique's dress. That was the first crack. Then came the late meetings. The weekend workshops. The trips that just happened to align with a male colleague's travel schedule, one she insisted was barely a friend, but whose laugh she suddenly quoted all the time. I played dumb. I played patient. I let her build the tower with her own lies. I just measured each brick. But the counseling session? That was the click. The final piece sliding into place. She wasn't looking for reconciliation. She was performing. Performing for the therapist, for herself, for some ghost of an audience that clapped every time she painted herself as the long-suffering wife married to a hollow shell of a man. It wasn't enough that she betrayed me. She wanted to win while doing it. So I stopped seeing her as a wife and started seeing her as a subject. That night, while she scrolled her phone on the couch, I stood up, kissed her on the forehead like nothing was wrong, and said I had a few papers to grade in the office. She smiled. "Don't stay up too late." I didn't answer. Instead, I locked the door to my study, pulled out the manila envelope from my desk drawer, and began labeling the tabs: receipts, timeline, audio, text fragments, hotel incidents, inappropriate work behavior. Not rage, not revenge, just cataloging. She wore the same face, said the same words, laughed the same practice laugh. But the mask she wore was slipping, and the woman beneath it was so used to lying, she didn't even notice when no one believed her anymore. By the time she looked up from her wine, I was already 10 steps ahead. And counting. I taught him sophomore English back when he wore Metallica hoodies and turned in essays late, but now Thomas ran a phone repair shop that reeked of solder and stale Monster energy drinks. He grinned when he saw me walk in, like I was there to reconnect over poetry and commas. I slid Karen's old iPhone across the counter. He raised an eyebrow. Data recovery? Deleted texts. Anything still hiding in the backups? He gave me a long look. The kind that shifts a person from nostalgia to suspicion. Personal. Professional, I said. Let's call it a long-term behavioral study. Thomas didn't ask more. Maybe he saw something in my eyes. Or maybe he lived long enough to recognize a man who wasn't looking for hope, just confirmation. He took the phone and got to work behind the counter. While his software did its thing, I leaned against the wall, scanning the messy bulletin board of repair invoices, lost AirPods, and a handwritten ad that said, "I can fix your life. Well, your laptop anyway." The irony wasn't lost on me. 20 minutes later, he had a thumb drive ready. Text threads, some voicemails, GPS logs from 2 months ago, and about 78 photos she thought were deleted, including some, not very PG. I nodded once. Print the location history. A full map overlay if you can. Thomas blinked. You really want a heat map of where she's been? I'm building a dossier, I said, deadpan. Every operation needs logistics. He chuckled uneasily but didn't argue. Next up, the voice recorder. I pulled a small velvet pouch from my coat. A gift I'd ordered online 3 weeks prior, barely larger than a thumb, with 20 hours of high-fidelity storage. Can you help me rig this under a front seat? I asked. She drives a Lexus. Too clean for me to tamper with unnoticed. Thomas raised both brows this time. You sure about this, Mr. K? I'm not chasing her, I said. I'm just documenting gravity. He whistled under his breath. You always were calm. Scary calm. When we stepped out into the parking lot, I parked beside Karen's car and popped the passenger door while she was still at work. 5 minutes and one strategically placed strip of Velcro later, the recorder was affixed under the passenger seat, camouflaged in the upholstery shadows. No mess. No wire showing. No trace. On the way back, I stopped at a Walgreens, bought a red file box, some manila folders, and sticky labels. That night, I started assembling the real archive, something that would outlive whispers and speculation. The kind of thing you drop in a lawyer's lap like a guillotine. Tab 1. April travel. Not with me. Tab 2. Coworker laughter. Thursday night wine. Tab 3. Deleted messages. I can't wait till he's out of the way. Each folder slid in like another quiet nail in a handcrafted coffin. This wasn't anger. It wasn't even heartbreak. It was infrastructure. Because while she was out there playing games, I was drawing blueprints. And when this house finally collapsed, I wanted to be the one holding the evacuation plan and the deed. The dinner was supposed to be with her sister. Thai place on 5th. Karen even texted me the menu around noon, circling the Panang curry like we were still that kind of couple. I didn't reply. I'd already seen her calendar alert for the night. Marked client dinner. No mention of her sister. And definitely no curry. At 6:08 p.m., she kissed me goodbye in the driveway, wearing heels too tall for casual family time and lipstick 2 shades past innocent. Don't wait up, she smiled. I won't, I said, watching her taillights fade like it was the last scene of a badly written sitcom. I got into my car 2 minutes later, took the side street, and kept enough distance that I wouldn't appear in any mirror she bothered checking. She didn't head east toward her sister's place. No surprise there. Instead, she turned north, past downtown, toward the boutique part of town where parking costs more than your conscience. She pulled into the Fowler House Hotel. Not a chain, not a business meeting kind of place either. Fowler is the kind of spot you go to for one thing: discretion. Upscale rooms, no front desk questions, no paper trails. I parked a block away and watched from a newspaper stand like it was 1950. She exited her car, straightened her blouse in the window's reflection, and walked through the automatic doors without hesitation. No phone out. No confusion. This wasn't a first time. 12 minutes later, a man joined her. Late 30s, tailored suit, confident in the way guys are when they know they've been invited. He didn't knock. He didn't check in. He just walked past the front desk, rode the elevator, and disappeared. I waited another 20. Then I stepped inside. I didn't speak to the staff. I didn't need to. I walked like I belonged, shoulders squared, tie loose like I'd just left a conference call. The front desk clerk gave me a polite nod. I nodded back. The elevator had a mirrored interior. As I stared at myself, I noticed something bizarre. I didn't look angry, just hollowed out, like a man halfway between mourning and revenge. I didn't go to their floor. I went to the business center, empty, quiet, and just close enough to get the hotel Wi-Fi. I pulled out my phone and tapped into the GPS trace Thomas had rigged to our shared account. Her location pinged steady. Room 512. It hadn't moved in 30 minutes. I snapped a photo of the hotel directory. A few minutes later, I took another outside room 512. Door closed. Privacy hanger on the knob. Then I took a final photo. The room charge slip left out by the front desk when no one was looking. Paid with a card under the name N. Ryland Corporation. That name meant nothing to me, but it wasn't our account, and it damn sure wasn't her personal card. Timestamped. Sorted. Emailed to myself under the subject. Thursday, not her sister. I left through the service exit. That night, Karen came home with greasy takeout bags and a tired smile, like she'd just spent 2 hours discussing family gossip over spring rolls. I brought you some pad CEU, she offered casually, holding out the box. I took it. Thanks. She didn't notice the new folder in my study labeled Fowler House. Didn't notice the faint smell of her perfume lingering in my car seat when I repositioned it to where I'd been hiding. And most importantly, she didn't notice the camera I'd installed facing our home office desk, set to activate whenever someone used her laptop. Let her keep building her story. I was already halfway through the footnotes. It was a Tuesday night, Karen's version of self-care, which always seemed to involve 2 girlfriends, 3 wine bottles, and a playlist of early 2000s breakup anthems loud enough to make our dog hide in the laundry room. I stayed upstairs in the guest room, pretending to grade papers while they cackled like a trio of witches in the kitchen below. The next morning, the house reeked of Merlot and self-righteousness. Lipstick-stained glasses still sat in the sink. One of her friends had left her scarf behind, silk, floral, overpriced. I folded it neatly and dropped it into the lost and not worth carrying bin in the garage. Then I went back upstairs, opened my laptop, and played the audio file from the voice recorder I'd hidden in the dining room light fixture 3 nights prior. I'd timed the install during a fake phone call with my brother, talking loud enough about lawn fertilizer to make Karen roll her eyes and walk off. Now I sat in silence, listening to my wife laugh harder than I'd heard in years. Not with me, of course. At me. You don't get it, Karen said between gulps. Michael is so slow. I could be living 2 lives and he'd still be asking if I need help with the groceries. The second voice, Brenda, I think snorted. You already are, babe. You just don't charge rent for the second one. Cue laughter. Then a third voice, maybe Tasha, chimed in. He's still doing the dishes, right? Bless his heart. Of course he is, Karen said, glass clinking. Guy folds laundry like it's a love letter. Meanwhile, I'm out here living my best real life. More laughter. Drunken giggles. Someone slurred a Taylor Swift lyric. I paused the playback. Sat back. Let it sink in. It wasn't the betrayal that got me. That part was already a scar. It was the joy, the absolute glee in her voice when mocking the man who held her hair back during food poisoning, who bought her dad a recliner when he was recovering from hip surgery, who took night shifts during flu season so she could sleep in peace. It's a strange thing, realizing someone doesn't just disregard you, they enjoy doing it. I labeled the file, Exhibit C, Tuesday Wine Night. Then I moved the entire recording to a flash drive labeled Final Session. I didn't need to listen again. I didn't need to cry. I just needed to be prepared. Karen walked in 2 hours later holding a yoga mat like it was proof of redemption. She smiled. Feel like salmon tonight? Sure, I said. I'll grill. She kissed my cheek. You're sweet. I looked her in the eye and smiled back. You have no idea. The manila envelope was hand-delivered to my office by a courier who didn't ask questions. Just nodded, signed the drop-off slip, and disappeared like he was trained to be forgettable. I waited until the last student had been dismissed for detention before locking my door and sitting down at my desk. Inside, 12 glossy prints. High-res. Time-stamped. Photo 1. Karen at an outdoor cafe, hair curled, sunglasses perched in that effortless, look-at-me-without-looking-at-me way. Opposite her sat a man I recognized immediately, Paul Givens, director of accounts. Smug, preppy, and insufferably tanned year-round. She'd mentioned him once during a conversation we didn't finish. Paul's harmless, she'd said, when I noticed his name showing up in a few late-night texts. Barely even an acquaintance. Photo 2. Karen leaning forward, laughing, hand touching his wrist. His eyes locked on her like a man mid-hunt. Photo 3. A valet snapshot. His hand on her lower back, lingering too long for casual. She didn't flinch. In fact, she leaned into it. Photo 4. The two of them standing beside a black Audi, his probably. She kissed him. Not a peck. Not a goodbye. A kiss that knew what it wanted. There were more. Park benches. Hotel awnings. A rooftop bar with string lights. All silent witnesses to something she'd sworn didn't exist. I closed the envelope, slid it into the drawer under Final Prep, and exhaled slowly. Not relief. Not rage. Just an exhale, like checking off a to-do item you've been putting off for too long. I didn't confront her that night. She came home chirping about her long quarterly planning session and how they were thinking of moving some regional accounts to Charlotte. I asked how Paul was doing. She blinked once too long. Same as always, she replied, too casual. Still can't stop talking about his golf handicap. I just nodded. Must be exhausting. She smiled. You have no idea. Oh, but I did. Instead of reacting, I logged into our therapist's online portal and scheduled a new session for next week. Marked it urgent. Not because I wanted answers. Because I was ready to hand over the evidence. The counselor thought we were still navigating rough seas. Poor guy didn't realize I'd already spotted the iceberg and started building my own lifeboat. Karen was still performing. Still sticking to her role in the little soap opera she'd choreographed. But the curtain was coming down. And this time, I was the one writing the final act. She arrived to the session in a fitted navy dress I'd never seen before. Hair blown out, makeup pristine, perfume heavy enough to linger after she walked in. She sat on the edge of the leather couch like she was being filmed, back straight, chin tilted slightly up, like a woman prepared to deliver a monologue about how hard it is to love a man who doesn't try anymore. The therapist, Neil, ever neutral, welcomed us with his usual zen energy and uncapped his pen. I gave him a polite nod, no smile. Karen leaned in. I've been thinking about what I said last time, she began, eyes flicking toward me, then back to Neil. And I realized, I want someone who'll fight for me. Her voice cracked, just a little. She'd been practicing. I want passion, she continued. Someone who shows they care. I mean, what's the point of love if the other person just sits there like a stone? You know, Neil nodded gently. And Michael, how do you respond to that? I reached down beside me, unzipped the small black portfolio I'd placed carefully on the couch when I arrived. I took out a stack of neatly sorted papers and a flash drive clipped to the corner. I didn't speak. I simply slid it across the glass coffee table to Neil. He blinked. What's this? Everything, I said, eyes still locked on Karen. Neil opened the folder. He glanced at the first page, a color photo of Karen at the rooftop bar with Paul Givens, her hand grazing his chest, lips close. Karen's smile froze. Wait, what is this? He flipped to the second page. A transcription of a voice recording. Karen, Michael's so slow. I could be living two lives. Brenda, you already are, babe. Neil's pen stopped moving. Where did you get this? Karen's voice cracked in earnest now. Page 3. Receipts. Hotel bookings. A corporate card with the Ryland Corporation name. GPS data. Location pings that placed her Lexus outside the Fowler House Hotel for separate times, each on a night she'd said she was meeting her sister. Page 4. A screenshot of an email exchange between Karen and Paul. Can't wait to see you again. He's still clueless, LOL. Neil put the folder down, eyes wide now, as if unsure if he should keep playing therapist or call for a witness protection program. Karen stared at me. You've been spying on me? I've been watching, I said evenly. There's a difference. She turned to Neil. You're seriously going to let him invade my privacy like this? This is emotional abuse. Neil raised a hand slowly. Karen, I think we need to pause for a moment. No, this is manipulation. He's trying to turn you against me. He didn't say a word. Neil replied, voice suddenly quiet. The evidence did. Karen stood up abruptly, dress rustling, eyes wild. This is entrapment. He's making it look worse than it is. It is what it is, I said, voice like a scalpel. You said you wanted someone who'd fight. I just didn't realize you meant against me. She started to cry. Real or fake, I couldn't tell anymore. The tears came easy with her. But for once, I didn't feel the urge to comfort. I didn't hand her a tissue. I didn't reach out. I let her sit in it. Neil closed the folder gently, hands trembling just enough to betray his professional calm. Michael, what do you want to happen next? I already have a plan, I said. This session was just to make sure the story is told correctly. Now that we're all caught up, I'm done here. Karen turned to me, mascara streaking, a desperate crack breaking through her performance. But I was already standing, already reaching for the doorknob, already walking out. She wanted drama. I gave her documentation. The house changed overnight. Karen stopped trying to pretend the air was breathable. The kitchen, once filled with that fake cheer and overcooked salmon, now felt like a battlefield where even the hum of the refrigerator was holding its breath. She didn't cook, didn't ask how my day was. She barely looked at me unless it was to hiss something like, so this is who you really are. A spy in your own home. I didn't reply. I just folded my socks in the laundry room like a man preparing for a long war of attrition. She stormed around muttering words like surveillance, emotional abuse, invasion of privacy, as if I'd broken into her life instead of simply opening the doors she left unlocked. She tried to make me the villain, painting herself into the martyr role, but I didn't rise to the bait. The next day, I moved into the guest room, not with a suitcase or ceremony, just my shaving kit, 2 drawers worth of clothes, and the book I'd been reading. I laid the doorstop gently and shut the door each night behind me, not to keep her out, but to keep my sanity in. She followed once, leaned against the doorframe like a woman in a bad soap opera. So that's it. You're just going to pretend like I'm some criminal. I didn't look up. I don't have to pretend. Her laugh was sharp. You're pathetic. You couldn't fight for me, so now you want to punish me with silence? No, I said quietly. I just finally accepted what I already knew. You're not my partner. You're my liability. That night, I sent a formal notice of separation to her work email. Short, legal, unemotional. I copied my lawyer. Sent a duplicate to her personal inbox. Marked it, read receipt, requested. Then I made the real move. I called my sister. Then my oldest friend, Jonathan. Then 3 couples from our shared social circle, the ones Karen would have sprinted to first if she could have gotten ahead of me. I told them, calmly, that Karen and I were separating, that I wouldn't go into detail, that I wished her peace. I didn't need to drag her name through the mud. She was already doing that herself. The fallout began slow. One of her wine night friends ghosted her within a week. Her own brother called to ask if everything was okay, in that voice people use when they've already heard something and are pretending not to know. I heard her on the phone one night, whispering urgently, he's making me look like the villain. You know how he is, quiet, calculating. He's probably got everyone fooled. She didn't realize how little I had to say for people to start asking their own questions. And when the silence grows louder than the excuses, there's nothing left to hear but the truth. She slammed the door after one particularly bitter night and shouted from the hallway, "You think you're so noble? This won't end how you think." I didn't even flinch. I just turned the page in my book and let the cold settle into the walls. Paul Givens was always chasing the next rung, corner office, title upgrade. The kind of man who referred to himself as a strategic thinker in LinkedIn posts that nobody asked for. So when word got out that he was being considered for a regional VP promotion, I knew exactly what was coming. I didn't need to sabotage him. I just needed to give gravity a nudge. A week after I moved into the guest room, I sent an anonymous envelope, typed, neutral, no fingerprints, to the HR department of Karen's firm. Inside, a simple statement accompanied by a USB drive labeled for internal review. The statement read, "This is submitted out of concern for the ethical standards of your leadership team. Mr. Givens has engaged in a sustained relationship with a subordinate who is currently married. Attached are time-stamped photos, hotel receipts, and recorded conversations captured outside company hours, but within context that may raise serious professional concerns. The involved party, Karen, last name, is under his management tier. No drama, no accusations, just facts, just enough to get the gears turning. HR departments don't like messy. They like clean, controlled reputations. They like plausible deniability. What they don't like are two employees tangled in a quiet affair, one of whom is up for a role that requires press access and brand responsibility." It took 4 days. Karen came home early on a Thursday, face flushed, makeup half-wiped. She dropped her purse on the floor like it weighed 100 pounds and went straight to the kitchen. I heard the wine bottle open before I even stepped out of my study. "They're placing me on leave," she said, not looking at me. "Pending investigation." I said nothing, just leaned on the doorframe and waited. They said someone submitted. "Materials," she continued. "Photos, transcripts, hotel receipts. Can you believe that? Receipts, Michael. People are thorough," I said. She looked up sharply. "You think I'm stupid? You think I don't know this was you?" "I haven't spoken to anyone at your company," I said, and that was the truth. Her eyes narrowed. "Then who? Maybe it was Paul's wife," I offered. "Or an intern with a conscience. Or maybe it was just karma running on time for once." She opened her mouth to respond, but couldn't find the line between rage and shame. The next week was a slow disintegration. Paul's promotion was delayed indefinitely. He stopped answering Karen's texts. She started whispering on the phone again, urgent, breathless calls to friends, lawyers, her sister, trying to do damage control. But the more she scrambled, the more people noticed. Rumors bloomed like mold. Brenda from Wine Night posted a cryptic Facebook status. "You never really know who someone is until HR does." Tasha removed Karen from the group chat altogether. By Friday, even Karen's yoga instructor paused her subscription, citing a realignment of class energy. Her world wasn't collapsing all at once. It was shrinking, closing in on her like a tightening noose. And I didn't have to lift a finger. I just made sure the mirror was clean when she finally looked at it. She wore gray this time. Not black, not navy gray. Like ash. Like someone who knew the fire had already passed through and now there was only smoke and silence left. No lipstick. Hair tied back. No performance. Just a woman trying to scrape together dignity from a pile of smoldering decisions. "I just want to talk," Karen said as I took my seat across from her. Neil looked older somehow, like 3 sessions had aged him a decade. He didn't smile. Didn't ask how we were doing. Just nodded like a man who'd rather be anywhere else but was too professional to say it. Karen leaned forward. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, Michael." I waited. "I was lost," she said. "I thought I needed something more, but I didn't realize I already had someone who cared. Who showed up. Who didn't abandon me even when I..." She choked, like the words burned going down. "I was scared. I got selfish. I thought maybe if I pushed you, you'd show you cared. But instead, I hurt you. I see that now. And I'm sorry." She started crying. Real tears? Possibly. But the thing about people like Karen is, they don't cry until the audience is already leaving the theater. Neil glanced at me. "Michael." I didn't respond. Just reached down and pulled out the final document from my leather folder. No photos this time. No recordings. Just clean legal clarity. Divorce papers. Already signed by me. Neatly paper-clipped. 2 copies. I handed them to Neil. Karen stared at them like they were written in another language. "What is this?" "I figured we'd make good use of the time," I said calmly. "You wanted resolution. So did I. But..." "Michael, please," she stammered. voice cracking. We could go to counseling. Real counseling. We could. No, I said. Quiet. Final. You said you wanted someone who'd fight. She nodded quickly. Yes, because I thought. I stood. I did. I said. I fought. Just not for you. Karen froze. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked at Neil, who was suddenly very busy not making eye contact with either of us. Michael, don't throw this away, she said, now reaching. Begging. This isn't you. I looked at her one last time. The woman who wore a mask for so long, she forgot what her real face even looked like. No, I replied. This is me. You just never paid enough attention. Then I walked out. No drama. No slammed doors. No final words screamed through tears. Just footsteps echoing down the hallway. And behind me, a woman who finally understood that silence wasn't weakness. It was the sound of a man leaving on his terms. She was already halfway gone when she said it. The kind of gone you don't come back from. The kind where your body's still in the room, but your soul is halfway down the hallway texting someone else. It was a Tuesday. I remember that because it was meatloaf night, and she didn't touch a single bite. Just sat there at the kitchen table with her arms folded like a teenager about to start a tantrum. I'd spent the day carving out walnut paneling for a client's study, precise, methodical work. Every edge had to match perfectly, or the whole thing looked like a mess. That kind of attention to detail sticks with you, even when you come home. So when I walked in and saw her phone flipped face down, the same playlist humming in her ears for the 5th day in a row, I noticed. Just like I'd noticed the faint scent of cologne that didn't belong to me the other night on her jacket. Just like I'd noticed she started showering twice a day and locking the door. But I played dumb. Dumb husbands live longer. I told myself that. She waited until dinner was cooling off before she finally looked up and said it like she was reading a memo out loud. I need space. I want to be alone. Like she was ordering a sandwich. No build-up, no explanation. Just that. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't ask what I did wrong. I just looked at her and said, quietly, alone from me? Or alone with someone else? Her eyes didn't flicker. Her expression didn't shift. She didn't gasp or cry or deny it. She just blinked, slowly, like she was tired of pretending to care. Then she looked past me, right through me, as if I were drywall she never liked in the first place. I should have screamed. Should have slammed the table and demanded answers like some dramatic movie scene. But all I could think about in that moment was how her left hand wasn't wearing her wedding ring anymore. Not since Sunday. And how I'd chalked it up to her doing dishes. That ring sat in a velvet box for 3 years before I could afford it. I had to take on extra jobs to buy it, late night sanding floors for rich people who didn't even know my name. And now here she was, casually deciding solitude was a better companion than the man who built her the walk-in closet she used to brag about. She stood up after that, like the conversation was over. Like she'd scratched something off her to-do list. As she walked upstairs, I noticed her phone buzz in her back pocket, screen lighting up as she adjusted her sweater. She didn't check it. Probably knew exactly who it was. And it sure as hell wasn't Gwen from yoga. No apology. No guilt. Just the echo of her footsteps on the stairs, and the soft thud of our bedroom door closing, once, and then again a second later as if she'd reopened it to double-check something. I sat there, meatloaf congealing on my plate, wine untouched. I didn't follow her. I didn't say another word. I just listened to the house fall silent and realized something terrifying in its simplicity. She didn't want to be alone. She just didn't want to be with me. And worse, whatever warmth we'd built over the years, whatever jokes or memories or lazy Sunday mornings once glued us together, she had scraped it all off without flinching. A part of me still hoped she'd come back down. Maybe say, I didn't mean it like that, or crack some half-hearted excuse. But that part of me was the same part that believed the squeak in the truck's brakes would fix itself if I ignored it long enough. So I sat. I waited. But all that came back down that night was her silence. And even that felt borrowed. I didn't move for 20 minutes. She'd gone upstairs, door closed, slippers still on. I could hear faint movements, drawers opening, closet hinges squeaking, the soft rustle of fabric. Probably picking out what she'd wear to mourn the death of our marriage. Or celebrate it. Hard to tell. I sat in that chair like it was a courtroom bench. No jury, no defense, just the sentence echoing in my head. I want to be alone. But even that sounded rehearsed now. Like someone else's words she'd borrowed. Some article, some Instagram quote wrapped in a hashtag about boundaries and healing and prioritizing self. Bullshit with a bow on it. I poured myself a glass of wine just to feel like I was doing something. It sat there untouched, crimson in the kitchen light. I watched the way it hugged the glass, slow and thick, like dried blood. She didn't come back down. No apology. No explanation. Not even a sigh from upstairs. But then her mistake happened. The kind of mistake cheaters make when they're too comfortable, too practiced. She forgot her smartwatch. It had been sitting on the kitchen counter next to the fruit bowl, right where she'd tossed it earlier after jogging, if that's what she'd actually been doing. I hadn't noticed it until the screen lit up, vibrating gently like a heartbeat on life support. One message. I didn't plan to look, but I did. The screen didn't lock. She never thought to password protect it, probably assumed I was too old, too slow, too clueless to even check. That was always her thing. She called me deliberate, like it was a synonym for stupid. The message read, "Tonight again? Same room, same dress. Just like that. Clinical. Familiar. No, hey, no pretense. Just coordinates. A time and a place wrapped in routine. And the contact? S. Not Sarah. Not Sean. Just a letter. Which somehow made it worse. That letter had history. S was someone she didn't have to explain. I stared at that little message like it was a grenade with the pin already pulled. I didn't take a photo. Didn't forward it to my phone. Didn't even open the rest of the thread. I didn't need more. One line was enough. It wasn't a confession. It was a calendar entry. This wasn't an affair in bloom. It was a ritual. I powered the watch off. Slowly. Deliberately. Not out of anger. Not yet. More like a priest closing a book after reading your sins aloud. Then I set it back on the counter, right next to the bananas. Let it blend in. Let her wonder if I saw. Let her wonder for years. Because in that moment, I understood everything I needed to. She didn't want space. She wanted square footage. She wanted to declutter the man who built her life from scratch and replace him with someone whose name didn't even deserve vowels. And in that realization, I didn't feel heartbreak. I felt clarity. That sharp, sterile kind. The kind you get before a surgery, right after the anesthetic kicks in, but before the blade cuts deep. I looked around the kitchen. My kitchen. The cherrywood cabinets I installed. The table I made with my own hands. The island where she once danced barefoot to Ella Fitzgerald while sipping wine and laughing like she actually loved me. It all felt like a museum exhibit now. And somewhere upstairs, she was texting back. Probably typing something like, "Can't wait." He's asleep. Except I wasn't. I was wide awake. And about to vanish. I woke up before sunrise. Not because I couldn't sleep, but because I didn't need to anymore. That kind of clarity? It's like cold water to the face. You don't toss and turn. You act. The house was dead silent. Lauren was still upstairs. Her side of the bed probably still warm from texting S under the covers while I sat downstairs next to the ghost of our marriage. I didn't go up to check. What was there to see? The same woman in the same skin, just filled with someone else's lies. I didn't make coffee. Didn't shower. Just stood in the hallway staring at the row of family photos. Us on a cruise. Us in Sedona. Us pretending. I didn't take any of them down. That would have given her something to notice. Something to read into. No. Let her look at those every day and feel nothing at first, then slowly wonder why the silence in the house feels sharper. I packed light. A single duffel bag. Clothes, tools, my grandfather's knife, the photo of my parents on their wedding day. That's it. No drama. No slamming drawers. No suitcase wheels screeching on the hardwood like some movie exit. Just footsteps. I left the note on the counter. Centered. One line. Wishing you peace in your solitude. I knew she'd hate that. The tone. The finality. The calm. She expected a fight. Tears. Questions. Maybe even an apology, some admission that I'd drifted too, that it wasn't all her fault. But no. I handed her exactly what she asked for. Solitude. I walked out the front door at 6:13 a.m. and never turned the handle again. My truck was already loaded with lumber for a custom cabinet job. I didn't cancel the appointment. Just drove to the shop and unlocked the door like it was any other day. Like my life hadn't just taken a scalpel to the chest. Above the shop was an old studio loft I hadn't used in years. It smelled like sawdust and memory. But it was mine. I spent the morning airing it out, hauling in a mattress, hooking up my record player. No big declarations. Just reclaiming space she'd never touched. By noon, I'd canceled her credit access. She liked the Amex. Flashy, with a metal feel and her name engraved like she earned it. Well, now it declined at Whole Foods. By 2 p.m., I'd redirected all mail to the shop. She used to mock that place. Called it my man cave with invoices. Funny. That cave was now my sanctuary. No walls laced with perfume. No mirrors fogged with deceit. Just clean air, sharp tools, and peace. I turned my phone on airplane mode for the night. I wasn't ready to see what she'd say, not because it would hurt, but because it wouldn't matter. That's the part people don't get. When betrayal cuts deep enough, the bleeding stops. It's like your soul clamps down. No more pulse for them to reach. And I never answered a single message. Not the text that came 2 days later, soft and confused. Not the calls a week after, laced with fake concern. Not even the one from her mother, which I assume was scripted by Lauren herself. Radio silence. That was the gift. She had mistaken my quietness for weakness, my stillness for softness. But silence? When wielded right, it doesn't just echo. It erases. Day 3 was when the first text came through. I saw it light up my old phone, the one I left face down on the edge of my workbench like an artifact from a life I no longer lived. I didn't touch it. Just let it buzz like a fly trapped in a jar. It's not what you think. Interesting opener for someone who couldn't even say goodbye. Like I had somehow misread the glow of her phone on the stairs, the message from S, the routine intimacy of betrayal wrapped up in 4 little words. Same room. Same dress. But sure, Lauren. Let's pretend this was a misunderstanding. A sitcom plot. A misplaced email, maybe. Then another ping. Let's talk. Be mature. Ah, maturity. Spoken like a true manipulator realizing their leash has slipped. The irony of a woman cheating in silence and then demanding an adult conversation when the audience stops clapping. She must have thought this was a phase. A stunt. That I was sulking somewhere, waiting for her grand monologue where she could center herself as the real victim. But I wasn't sulking. I was sanding. A walnut headboard. Smooth as glass. Designed for someone else's master bedroom. I carved each edge with surgical focus. Every pass of the grain felt like cleansing a wound I'd let fester for too long. I didn't even realize my phone had buzzed again until dusk. I just needed time. She really leaned into the performance. Time. Space. Growth. All the familiar buzzwords cheaters use like incense to mask the stink. As if healing required backroom hookups with men whose names were reduced to initials. As if growth meant erasing the man who once built her life piece by piece with his hands, not hashtags. I let the phone die that night. Let her messages rot in the void of unanswered air. Let her wonder why her words, once sharpened like daggers, now fell dull against the wall of silence I'd built brick by brick. The next morning, the desperation turned acidic. Why are you ghosting me? And there it was, the panic behind the performance. The mask slipping. Ghosting. As if I was the one who disappeared. As if I didn't spend years in plain sight, quietly begging for her to look up from her phone, to hear the difference between presence and partnership. As if I hadn't been the steady drumbeat she tuned out for the siren song of novelty. But here's the thing Lauren never understood. I didn't ghost her. I gave her exactly what she asked for. Space. Distance. Freedom. She handed me the scissors. I just stopped trying to untangle the knots. You see, silence isn't passive. It's surgical. It cuts deeper than shouting ever could. Because it doesn't need to justify itself. It doesn't flail. It doesn't bleed. It lets go. I watched the sunlight fade across my studio floor that evening, the golden hour slicing through the blinds in clean lines. Outside, the world buzzed along, unaware that something sacred had been severed. Inside, I placed the final coat of finish on a desk I'd been working on for 2 weeks. It gleamed, not because of the polish, but because I'd poured the parts of myself that she couldn't break into something that would outlast both of us. And while Lauren sat alone, typing messages into a void where love used to be, I built something she could never reach. Peace. I didn't stage some big reveal. No dramatic group texts. No family meeting with trembling hands and evidence photos on the table. I didn't even bother to tell my brother. The man lives for drama. He would have started a group chat just to speculate about the guy's hairline. Instead, I let the silence work for me. It was funny how quickly the story grew legs on its own. People don't need much to build their own little tragedies. A neighbor sees your truck gone for 2 weeks. Your wife starts showing up to wine nights with a new man in tow. A mutual friend posts a picture of them laughing too hard at a winery that neither of us ever liked. And boom. Did you hear? I think Adam and Lauren split. She's with someone else now. Seth. That was the name that floated back to me. Always in that cautious, slightly sympathetic tone people use when they think you're fragile. Like I might start sobbing into my circular saw if they say it too fast. Seth, the real estate guy. Early 40s. Gelled hair. Button-downs with top buttons open like he's perpetually stuck in a bad cologne commercial. Drove a leased BMW and had a tooth-whitening business on the side, according to one of the guys at the lumberyard. Apparently, he met Lauren at some charity fundraiser. The kind she used to drag me to, back when she still wore her ring and smiled without forcing it. Back when she used to introduce me like I was her partner, not her placeholder. They looked good together, I'm told. Youthful. Energetic. Full of hashtags and brunch reservations. And me? They assumed I was shattered. Living above my shop like some recluse with a beard and a broken heart. A sad little man holed up with his chisels and wood glue, nursing his wounds with late-night bourbon and country songs. Let them think that. Because while they were passing around theories, I was busy rebuilding something a hell of a lot more important than a marriage. Myself. No audience. No applause. Just early mornings, hard labor, and the satisfaction of finishing projects no one clapped for. I took on more commissions. Stopped saying no to the bigger jobs. Reclaimed the hours I used to spend waiting for her to come home. Used them to draw up custom plans for libraries, staircases, entire interiors. Designs that made sense. That held weight. Unlike the woman who once told me she needed space, then filled it with a guy who probably spends more time moisturizing than thinking. And it was in that silence, in that deliberate non-explanation, that I found leverage. Because when you don't tell your side of the story, people get uncomfortable. They lean in. They guess. They project. And the best part? Lauren couldn't control the narrative. Her texts had stopped. Maybe Seth was keeping her busy. Or maybe the silence had started to itch under her skin. Either way, I stayed quiet. Watched the pieces fall into place without ever lifting a finger. Somewhere between the second and third week, I ran into an old friend of hers at the lumber supplier, Kathy, I think. She smiled too wide, her voice too careful. I saw Lauren at a gallery event the other night. She was with someone. You doing okay? I smiled back. Not too wide. Just enough. Better than I've ever been. And that was true. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't reacting. I was building. I buried myself in the work. Not like some cliché widower of a dead marriage, but like a craftsman who finally cleared the rot from his foundation. My studio, once just a dusty loft above the shop, had become something else entirely. A place with rhythm. Purpose. The scent of freshly sanded cedar replaced the perfume that used to cling to my sweaters. My world didn't shrink, it sharpened. Commissions started rolling in. First a couple of high-end bookshelves for a retired professor's study. Then a custom breakfast nook for a young couple renovating a century-old home. Word spread, not because I marketed it, but because people could feel the weight in the grain of what I built. There was something solid about it. Honest. No veneer. No hidden screws. One day, I got a call from a local magazine editor named Rachel who had heard about my work through a client. We want to feature your studio, she said. There's something refreshing about a man who builds things that last. I almost laughed. If she only knew. But I said yes. Let her bring her photographer. I let the shop speak for itself. Unfinished tabletops lined up like quiet monoliths. The smell of tung oil lingering in the air. No forced smiles. No awkward poses. Just me, a flannel shirt, and the sharp truth of mahogany. 2 weeks later, the article dropped. Grain and grit. The man behind the quiet revival of local craftsmanship. My phone lit up with texts. Old friends. A few former clients. Even my niece, who never cared about woodworking but loved the photo where I stood next to the spiral staircase I'd built from scratch. Lauren didn't text, but I know she saw it. Because the very next day, her Instagram lit up like a 4th of July sparkler. Photos. Stories. Filtered sunsets. Wine glasses raised against backdrops that didn't quite match the tone of someone healing. There was one picture, her and Seth on a rooftop bar, faces close. His teeth too white, his shirt too tight. Her hand on his chest like she was claiming a prize at a raffle. The caption? Trust the process. Hashtag healing, hashtag new chapter, hashtag grateful. Sure. Grateful that I wasn't around to witness this performance in real time. Grateful that Seth hadn't yet noticed the way she weaponized vulnerability like a scalpel wrapped in a cashmere scarf. But I noticed something else. In every photo, she was smiling, but never with her eyes. You know that look, the difference between genuine joy and forced optimism. The kind of smile you plaster on for the audience while something inside you scratches at the door. And I knew that smile well. I'd seen it in the mirror during the last year of our marriage. She posted again that night. A carousel of candid shots, laughing, sipping, leaning into him like the past never happened. But she couldn't quite conceal it. That barely there tightness in her shoulders. The way her body leaned, but her gaze drifted just slightly off-center. Like she was waiting for something. Validation, maybe. An audience. Me. But I wasn't playing that role anymore. She was performing for a crowd that didn't exist. Just her and the hollow echo of curated moments. While I was waist-deep in sawdust and symmetry, molding tangible beauty from raw chaos. She tried to write over our story with filters and hashtags. But what doesn't lie? And neither do the eyes. It was a Thursday when the cracks started showing. Not in her face. Those were still filtered, airbrushed, sun-kissed. But in the captions. The tone. The subtle unraveling of her public fairy tale, one square at a time. It had been exactly 2 months since I left the note on the counter and walked out of that house like a man stepping off a sinking ship. Since then, I'd made peace with a lot of things. Mostly by staying offline. But that day, I checked her Instagram. Not out of longing curiosity, maybe. Or instinct. Something in the air told me the mask was slipping. I wasn't wrong. The first thing I saw was a story. Just white text on a black background. People always leave. That was it. No emojis. No geotag. No Seth. I tilted my head. That wasn't her style. Lauren liked gloss. Sunsets and lattes and yoga mats rolled out next to waterfalls. That caption? It sounded like a drunk teenager scribbling poetry in a diary at 2 a.m. Then came another story, less than an hour later. Be careful who you trust. Ah, there it is. The passive-aggressive blame grenade. I screenshotted it, not for leverage, not even for proof. Just for the record. Like marking a date on a calendar. Not to go back. Just to remember when things changed. Then came the third story. Sometimes silence is the loudest betrayal. And I almost laughed. Loudest betrayal? Lauren, you handed me a request for space with one hand and an affair with the other. I gave you both. Neatly. Without a scene. You turned my silence into a vacuum, and now that it's echoing louder than you expected, suddenly it's cruel? It was Seth. He was gone. I didn't need confirmation, but I got it anyway. She unfollowed his real estate page a few days later. Quietly. No fanfare. No sad post with a wine glass and a quote about growing apart. Just gone. The man she dismantled a marriage for had likely evaporated the moment she asked him for something real. Commitment. Consistency. Boring things like Tuesday dinners and loyalty. The things she once sneered at when I offered them every day without fail. And now? She was alone. But not the kind she asked for. The real kind. Not artistic solitude. Not self-care retreats or bubble baths under twinkle lights. The kind where no one texts goodnight. No one misses you when you don't post. No one asks where you've been. That kind. I didn't reach out. I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile. I just slid my phone back into my coat pocket and went back to finishing a dining table for a newlywed couple. Solid maple. 6-seater. Built to last. Funny thing about working with wood, it doesn't lie to you. It doesn't pretend to be stronger than it is. You can read every knot, every imperfection. You learn where to cut, where to reinforce, where to sand down the edges, and where to let them show. I thought about Lauren as I ran my hands along the tabletop. She never wanted silence. She wanted noise she could control. And when I took that away, all she was left with was herself. It started with a voicemail at 2:12 a.m. The timestamp said everything. That's the hour when guilt rolls over in bed and realizes it's alone. When wine-soaked confidence turns into sobering silence and the weight of what you ruined presses against your chest like a cinder block. I didn't recognize the number at first. She must have called from a new phone or blocked ID. Maybe she thought I'd be more likely to answer if the name didn't pop up. Rookie move. The kind cheaters make when the thrill turns into regret and they remember who they used to be too late. I played it on speaker. Let it echo through the shop as I wiped down a slab of red oak. Her voice cracked almost immediately. Adam, I know you probably won't hear this. I was confused. I didn't know what I needed. I thought. Click. Deleted. I didn't even let her get to the justifications. Because I knew what was coming. They all follow the same template. Confusion, nostalgia, a soft admission of selfishness wrapped in language designed to almost sound like remorse. But remorse is a currency you can't pay late. And I no longer accepted that kind of payment. 3 days later, another one. Hey, I know I said I needed space, but you were always so steady. You were the eye of the storm. I thought I needed excitement, but that was just noise. I missed your calm. Click. Deleted. The irony was delicious. She left for fireworks and found herself in smoke. She wanted a man with a louder laugh, flashier shoes, spontaneous getaways. Someone who made her feel 29 again. Instead, she got a man who vanished the second the curtain fell. Now she was circling back. Not because of love, but because reality was colder than she'd planned for. Because the man who once stood across from her making omelets in the morning and fixing the sink without being asked no longer picked up her calls. The voicemails became a pattern. Never more than 30 seconds. Always shaky, always layered with that tone. The breathy, performative kind she used when she wanted sympathy without ever actually admitting fault. I was selfish. I thought I could have both. I keep remembering the way you used to hold the back of my neck when we danced in the kitchen. Oh, now she remembered. Funny how selective memory becomes when you've burned all your bridges and realize the last one still standing is the one you blew up yourself. But here's the part that matters. I never listened to a single one all the way through. I'd hear enough to catch the tone. The cracks, the deliberate pauses designed to sound unscripted, and then click into the void. Because here's what she never understood. The moment she lied in silence, when she let "I need space" hang in the air while she snuck off to motel rooms with a man known only as S, she killed her own voice. It didn't matter how many times she called. She was speaking to someone who no longer lived at the address she destroyed. And her words, once weaponized and sharp, now bounced off the walls of a shop where her name had no echo. You don't get to kill something in silence and then resurrect it in whispers. Especially when the man you betrayed built his peace from the ashes you left behind. The invitation came in a cream-colored envelope with Gwen's usual dramatic flair, calligraphy, gold embossing, the whole 9 yards. Inside, Gwen's fabulous 50, a celebration of strength, style, and scandal. Just kidding. Unless? Typical Gwen. She was Lauren's friend originally. One of those people who straddled the social fence after the split, never picking sides outright, but definitely watching the fallout like a Netflix drama. I hadn't seen her since before the "I need space" speech, so getting that envelope felt like a test. A dare, almost. I stared at it for a while. Considered tossing it. But then I thought, why not? Why not walk into a room full of people who assumed I'd quietly withered into a recluse? Why not show them that silence doesn't mean surrender, and that some things grow stronger when nobody's watching? I RSVP'd with 2 words, +1. Claire was the first name that came to mind. We'd met a month earlier on a job. She was designing a full interior renovation on a lakefront home and needed custom shelving to match the curve of the walls. She had that kind of calm confidence that made everything feel easy. No small talk, no probing questions about my journey or healing. Just straight to business, with the occasional dry joke and a coffee order that matched mine exactly. She never once asked what happened with Lauren, which frankly made her irresistible. When I asked if she wanted to come to the party, she didn't hesitate. Just tilted her head, smiled, and said, "Do I have to wear something with sequins?" I told her no. Just be yourself. The night of the party, I opened my closet and realized I hadn't worn anything but work boots and flannel in months. So I did something radical. I suited up. Tailored jacket. Dark navy. Crisp white shirt. Haircut that didn't scream, desperate reinvention, but definitely didn't say still grieving. I looked in the mirror and, for the first time in over a year, didn't see a man holding his breath. Claire arrived in a black dress that managed to look elegant without trying. Minimal makeup. Her hair pulled back like she didn't need to prove anything. And when she smiled, it wasn't a mask. We drove together. The party was at Gwen's place, an old converted barn turned into a modern rustic event space. Lanterns everywhere, indie jazz playing over hidden speakers, charcuterie boards that could feed a small nation. The moment we stepped in, heads turned. I didn't say a word, didn't nod or smile too wide. Just walked in like I belonged there, which, honestly, I did. Claire touched my arm lightly as we moved through the crowd. She didn't cling. She didn't perform. She just stood next to me like she knew I wasn't there for approval. People approached. Some cautiously. Some with wide eyes and forced smiles. The whispers weren't loud, but I could feel them graze the back of my neck like static. Is that Adam? He looks good. Is that the woman from the magazine article? Claire leaned in at one point and said, "You weren't kidding. This is a social safari." I laughed. And it was real. Not the kind you fake when people ask if you're doing okay. We made our way to the drink table. Claire picked wine. I grabbed a whiskey. We clinked glasses. I felt the weight in my chest shift, like I'd finally stopped carrying a house on my back that wasn't mine anymore. And just as I was starting to relax, I caught a flicker of motion near the entrance. I turned, and there she was. Lauren. Alone. Dressed to impress, but slightly off. The lipstick too bold. The heels too high. A dress I'd never seen before, but somehow still recognized. The kind you buy last minute to feel like someone else. She scanned the room like she was looking for oxygen. And when her eyes landed on me, everything in her face tightened. She hadn't expected me to be there. She especially hadn't expected Claire. Or the way I looked standing beside her, calm, effortless, not at all the broken man she thought she'd left behind. She froze. Claire turned to me and said, "You okay?" I nodded. "Yeah," I said, then took a slow sip of whiskey. Because for the first time since Lauren asked for space, I wasn't in the past. I was already living in the future. She walked in late. Not fashionably. Not with flair. Just late. The kind of late that feels unintentional. The kind that happens when you sit in your car rehearsing what to say if he shows up. Lauren stood in the doorway like a woman who used to own the room and suddenly couldn't find the light switch. She scanned the crowd too fast, smiled too hard at people who didn't look up. Her makeup was heavy, precise. The kind that cracks if you blink too long. Her dress, tight, metallic, something meant to announce rather than flatter, caught the light as she moved inside, but it didn't land. It looked like armor built for a battlefield that no longer existed. And then she saw me. It was fast. One moment she was scanning the appetizers. The next, her gaze hit mine, and her entire face shifted. A tiny intake of breath, the flicker of a smile that died halfway to the surface. Her lips parted like she might say my name, but her throat never caught up. Because I wasn't standing there like she expected. I wasn't sipping bourbon alone in the corner, nursing a scar and hoping someone would ask how I was doing. No, I was laughing. Claire had just whispered something to me, something dry, probably about Gwen's bizarre choice of live jazz meets techno remix, and I was chuckling, relaxed. One hand casually tucked into my pocket, the other wrapped around Claire's hand. Not clinging, not posing, just there, real, and happy. Claire's hand fit into mine like it belonged there. No performance, no pressure, just quiet understanding. She didn't tighten her grip when Lauren stared. Didn't glance her way or throw subtle jabs. She didn't need to. Her presence was the statement. Lauren stepped forward, then froze. Like her body had moved before she gave it permission. She stood at the edge of the room, unsure of where to go. Everyone else flowed around her, laughing, mingling, unaware that a little war was unfolding in her chest. Her eyes darted again, searching, maybe for Seth, maybe for a friend, maybe just for a moment to rewrite what she'd walked into. But it was too late, because I didn't flinch, didn't stiffen, didn't look away like I owed her anything. Instead, I looked right at her. Calm, steady, not smug, but centered. The kind of look you give someone who walked out mid-movie and expected you to leave the theater too. Claire leaned in again and said, "Is that her?" I nodded once. She glanced, then shrugged. "You win." I smiled. Not because it was a competition, but because silence had done all the talking. Lauren took one step back. Just one. But it said everything. That single movement, the way her heels slightly caught on the polished floor, the microsecond stumble she tried to mask, was the slap she never expected to feel. Because no one had touched her. But she had been replaced. Not with a younger version. Not with a trophy or rebound or someone designed to make her jealous. No. She had been replaced with peace. And it terrified her. She moved like a storm gathering speed, heels clicking too sharp on hardwood, that anxious urgent gait of someone who thought she could still control the narrative. I saw her coming before she spoke. Her eyes locked on me like I was a lifeboat, and she just realized her ship was sinking. The crowd parted subtly, sensing something brewing. She didn't say my name like a lover. She said it like a lifeline. Adam, can we talk? Just for a second. The desperation in her voice wasn't loud. It was strangled. Careful. Meant only for me. But the room heard it. I turned. Not quickly. Not with drama. Just enough. Saw her face, pale beneath too much foundation. Eyes wide, glistening, pleading. I felt the beat of that moment, how badly she wanted me to give her a scene. To let her say her piece, maybe cry a little, maybe tell everyone I'd misunderstood. That she never meant for it to end like this. That she was confused. That Seth was a phase. That I'd always been the real one. But the time for honesty had expired. And so had her voice in my life. I looked her in the eye. Let the pause stretch, but not snap. Then turned to Claire, still beside me with her quiet calm, and said, in the tone I usually reserved for discussing would finish. The wine's better on the balcony. Claire smiled, nodded, and took my arm. And just like that, we walked. Past the buffet, past Gwen's curious glance, past the DJ table. I didn't speed up. I didn't look back. The music kept playing, some jazzy cover of a pop song, but it might as well have been a requiem. Lauren didn't follow. She stood there stuck, eyes wide, arms slightly out like she just stumbled but hadn't hit the floor yet. Guests peeked at her over rims of wine glasses. Some tried to look away too fast. Others leaned into the drama like moths circling the flame. No one spoke to her. Not one person offered a hand or asked if she was okay. And suddenly, the word that once felt like freedom, space, tightened around her like a noose. She had it now. All the space in the world. A ballroom full of it. But no anchor. No audience. Just exile. Not the poetic kind. Not a retreat into self-discovery. This was the lonely, echoing kind of exile that creeps in when the only person who ever truly knew you walks past you like you're already gone. We stepped out onto the balcony. The breeze hit my face. Crisp. Clean. Claire handed me my glass. Behind me, the door clicked softly shut. And just like that, the past was sealed off behind glass and would in 50 sets of curious eyes. She had asked for a second, but I had already given her years. No? Not one more second. Not one more word. Not one more glance. She was on the outside now. And the view from the balcony? Flawless. The message came in just after midnight. Not dramatic, not multi-paragraph. Just a single, desperate thread sent from the same number she used to spam with dinner updates, shopping lists, and the occasional love you back when words still had weight. I saw the notification light up in the dark, phone face up on the nightstand for once. Not because I was waiting, just because I had nothing left to hide. Claire was already asleep beside me, her breathing steady, her hand tucked beneath the pillow like a child who trusted the world to stay still. I didn't rush to open it. Didn't feel a jolt. Just let the screen glow in the silence of my new life. Then I read it. You were the only thing keeping me from falling. Now I understand what alone really means. It didn't sting. It didn't spark. It just confirmed. Confirmed what I'd known since the night she looked through me at our kitchen table. That she was never searching for solitude, just permission to destroy and still be loved afterward. But the finality in that text? That was the sound of the door she slammed finally echoing back. Not because she was sorry. Not really. Because she thought I'd still be there. Lauren had always assumed I'd orbit her forever, no matter how cold she went. That I'd stay tethered. That silence was just another move in the game. But this wasn't chess. This was demolition. I turned off the phone. Slowly. Like turning out a light in a room you've already emptied. Then I looked at Claire. Her hair spilled across the pillow. No makeup. No curated angles. No performance. Just real, human stillness. The kind of stillness that doesn't demand attention because it's not trying to fill a void. It just is. I whispered, so quiet even I barely heard it. Good. Now you finally understand me. Not out of spite. Not to win. Just because it was true. She wanted to know what alone meant. It wasn't candles and silence and a new man's hand across your thigh in a rented condo. It was standing in a room full of people and realizing the one person who used to see you, really see you, is gone. Gone in a way that no apology can reverse. Gone in a way that silence doesn't heal, it reinforces. I lay back, let the sheath wrap around me. No noise. No guilt. Just the soft rhythm of someone breathing beside me. Someone who hadn't broken anything to be here. And for the first time in years, my sleep wasn't interrupted by memory, or resentment, or hope. Just rest. Pure. Quiet. Final. The last thing I expected to hear at dinner was that I'd been upgraded from dad to sponsor. We were halfway through a rare steak I'd grilled to perfection, medium rare, as she liked it, when my wife set down her fork with a little clink and said, so casually it almost didn't register, Madison's decided she wants to live with her real father. Just for her last semester. Says she needs a change of environment. There was no build-up. No, we need to talk. No warning flare in the sky. Just a precision missile dropped mid-chew. I didn't look up. I focused on slicing a perfect piece, like I hadn't heard her. Like maybe, if I didn't acknowledge it, the sentence would fold in on itself and disappear into the air like steam. But she kept going, voice syrupy, like this was all perfectly reasonable. She thought it'd be good for her mental health. And we support that, don't we? Her tone had that weaponized warmth women use when they're daring you to object. I finally looked at her. Not angry. Not confused. Just quiet. The way you look at a stranger who somehow used your toothbrush. She added, with a smile so tight it looked stapled on. You'll still help with tuition, right? For stability. She's already registered. I mean, you wouldn't just leave her hanging in her final semester. I wiped my mouth slowly. Set the napkin down with deliberate calm. Stood up. Of course, I said. She seemed relieved. Mistook my stillness for agreement. But I wasn't agreeing, I was pausing. Like an animal in the wild that hears a twig snap and holds absolutely still. Not out of fear. Calculation. I walked to the garage, grabbed the carry-on bag I kept packed for work trips. The one she hated because I refused to buy a nicer one. You make enough, she'd said more than once, rolling her eyes at its scuffed wheels and peeling zipper tab. I didn't slam any doors. I didn't shout. I didn't ask why they decided this together without me, or when the timeline was cooked up, or what real father even meant to a girl who hadn't seen the man sober since the Bush administration. Instead, I rolled the suitcase past the dining room where the plates still sat warm, past the little shelf with the framed photo of our last Thanksgiving, me, her, Madison, all smiling, and out into the quiet night. No one followed. They didn't think they needed to. She probably assumed I'd just gone for a drive to cool off, that I'd be back by morning, maybe with flowers, or a tuition check, like always. But the moment I backed out of the driveway, I felt something peel off me like old skin. Not pain, just a strange lightness. A vacuum where obligation used to live. I didn't know yet what I'd do, but I knew what I wouldn't. Come crawling back like a man begging to keep his seat at a table where he'd already been served the bill. That night, I checked into a dingy business hotel off the interstate. The kind with scratchy towels and the smell of mildew trying to pass itself off as ocean breeze. I dropped my bag on the floor, sat on the edge of the bed, and looked at my phone. There were no messages. I stared at the black screen for a long time. Then I turned it off completely. The motel's Wi-Fi was barely functional, kept cutting out every 30 seconds like it needed to catch its breath. I sat at the little round table near the window, plastic chair squeaking under me, as I typed in my login credentials for the college's financial portal. I knew every tab by heart. For years of paying on time will do that to a man. Each semester, log in, confirm tuition, confirm housing, confirm meal plan. Autopay enabled. Card on file ending in 9921. That card had funded more late-night pizza orders and overpriced textbooks than I could count. I hovered over the Payment Methods tab for a moment. My cursor flickered on the screen like it was nervous. Then I clicked. First, disable autopay. Confirm? Yes. Second, remove card on file. Confirm? Yes. Third, sign out. No message. No email. No farewell. Just the silence of a transaction voided. The soundless unraveling of a lifeline. I closed the laptop, stood up, and looked around the room. Beige wallpaper that hadn't been updated since dial-up internet. A lamp with a crooked shade. A framed print of a sailboat drifting away. Subtle, almost offensive in its symbolism. I picked up my phone and opened my banking app. Lease account for the BMW, paid through end of the month. I tapped into the lease portal, terminated it early. Penalty fee? Worth it. Insurance? Canceled. Not suspended, canceled. I imagined her face when she got the notification. Maybe she'd still be sipping Merlot in the kitchen, waiting for me to come to my senses. Maybe Madison would be upstairs, FaceTiming her real dad, making plans like I was just the help who'd overstayed his welcome. But now the help had clocked out. No message. No fight. Just cold, silent deletions. I booked a cabin on the northern coast. 3 weeks, no reception, with stove, private trail to the beach. It cost less than 1 month of Madison's off-campus housing. The payment cleared instantly. That, too, was funded by the same man now being written out of the story. I stared at the confirmation screen. We look forward to hosting you, Mr. Randall. The irony wasn't lost on me. The only place still glad to have me was a weather-beaten cabin no one had heard of, wedged between cliffs and ocean fog. I powered down my phone and wrapped it in an old T-shirt. Tossed it into the bottom of my duffel. I wasn't running. I wasn't hiding. I was just done participating in the theater of their life, where I got to pay for the production and watch from the hallway. Outside, the highway hummed. Somewhere far down the road, a college girl was probably posting a filtered Instagram story captioned, "New beginnings with my real fam, 2 hearts folded hands dot." And somewhere behind that post was a man with a drink in his hand and no idea what a bursar's office even was. They'd made their move. Now it was my turn to vanish from the board. Back at the house, the one I'd remodeled top to bottom, the one with the custom oak cabinets she insisted we splurge on because Pinterest said so, Carol poured herself a second glass of white and FaceTimed her sister. "Oh, it went better than I thought," she said, laughing. He didn't even argue. Just stood up and walked out. Took his little suitcase like he was heading to a Marriott. She paused for a second, then leaned in like she was about to share a dirty secret. "He'll pay. He always does." They laughed. Her sister said something about men being simple creatures and always needing to feel useful. I'm sure they toasted to it. Maybe even imagined me somewhere in a hotel bar, crying into my whiskey while wiring another tuition payment like a good little golden retriever. Meanwhile, Madison, our shared blessing as Carol once called her, was busy uploading a photo in front of her biological father's apartment. A grim little building in a part of town I wouldn't park in after sundown. But she framed it right, cropping out the cracked sidewalk and the guy smoking in a lawn chair by the stairwell. Her caption? New start dizzy real roots. Real family. #grateful #home. In the comments, a flood of heart emojis. Proud of you. Finally, real family always wins 2 hearts. And just like that, I was erased with a single filter and a hashtag. They didn't notice the email sitting in Madison's college inbox. Subject line, unpaid tuition reminder, spring semester. They didn't notice the bold red warning on her student portal, blinking gently like a quiet little bomb. Payment overdue. Enrollment at risk. Carol had the audacity to take the Mercedes that day, my car, technically, to her tennis group and brag that he finally got the message. He knows she needs this. He's smart enough not to rock the boat. Someone asked how I took the news. "Oh, you know John," she said. Too proud to cry. Too guilt-ridden to walk away. She didn't realize I hadn't walked away. I had stepped off a sinking ship and left them to argue about seat cushions. They ordered sushi that night. Expensive stuff. Probably figured it was still coming out of the same card I always used, the one I removed 36 hours ago. She posted a photo of tuna tartare and sake. Girls' night with my favorite person growing heart sushi #blessed. There was no clue in her grin that she was financially floating on a fantasy. No inkling in Madison's smug little smirk that her scholarship had already been suspended pending account resolution. No one noticed the silence. Because they thought silence meant surrender. They mistook calm for weakness. Absence for submission. And so they danced at the edge of a cliff, smiling like lottery winners, while the ground beneath them quietly began to crack. The first crack didn't come with thunder or drama. It came as a voicemail. "Hi, Madison. This is Karen from the bursar's office. We're just following up about your spring semester tuition. It's currently overdue and showing as unpaid. Please give us a call to resolve this." She played it twice, squinting like the words were in code. Overdue? No, that couldn't be right. She redialed the number, forced a giggle to lighten the confusion. "Hi. Yeah, I think there's been a mix-up. My dad usually pays that. John Randall? He's probably just late. You know how dads are." Karen paused. Then came the polite but professional tone that signals no sympathy is forthcoming. "According to our records, the payment method on file has been removed. There's currently no valid form of payment attached to your account." Madison blinked. The silence on her end stretched too long. I thought it was automatic. She caught herself. "I'll call him." Sorry, but she didn't. She texted him once, "Hey, can you check the college payment thing?" and got no reply. The message hung there, delivered, but unread, like a postcard flung into space. She went to check her student portal. Alert, tuition unpaid, $18,467. Warning, failure to resolve by January 20th will result in automatic disenrollment. She refreshed it 4 times like maybe the number would shrink if she looked hard enough. Then came the second tremor. She left class early to meet friends for lunch, only to find the BMW gone. Not stolen, just gone. In its place was an empty space with a faint oil stain and a yellow sticker fluttering on the curb. She peeled it off. Vehicle repossessed for lease termination. Please contact service provider. She stood there in disbelief, clutching the sticker like it might tell her something different if she stared longer. A couple of underclassmen walked past and glanced at her like she was in trouble, which she was, but she hadn't realized it yet. Back in her apartment, she finally pulled up her email, hoping maybe the scholarship office had some grace to offer. Instead, she found this. "Dear Madison Randall, due to unresolved financial delinquency, your merit scholarship has been suspended pending full payment of tuition. You may appeal this decision by contacting our office before January 25th. Her breath caught. Not panic yet. Not fully. But close. She called her mother, who answered mid-laugh, probably still gossiping over wine with her sister. "Mom, something's wrong. The tuition didn't go through, and my car." Carol cut her off. "Sweetheart, relax. He probably just forgot. I'll call him. He's not answering. Then call again. You know how he gets when he's sulking. He'll come around. He always does." But even as she said it, Carol's voice had a tremor underneath. The kind you try to laugh through when your foot slips on the stairs and you're pretending it didn't happen. Madison sat in her room that night, scrolling through her Instagram feed, the same one where she'd declared her new beginning with real family, and wondered how fast a dream can rot when the checkbook disappears. The posts were still there. The captions still glowing with smug certainty. But the lights were flickering. The cracks had formed. And somewhere out there, the man they'd pushed out of the frame was watching, calm, quiet, and utterly unreachable. Madison waited until the next morning to call him. Her real dad. The man who'd shown up to 3 birthdays in 20 years and somehow still managed to get a framed photo on her dresser. He answered on the 4th ring, voice groggy and crackling like he was already halfway through a cigarette. "Hey kiddo. What's up?" She softened her voice. "Hey, so there's an issue with tuition. Like, some kind of mix-up. The college says it's overdue, and the scholarship's suspended because of it. I thought maybe you and Mom talked, but I guess not." Silence. Then the unmistakable rustle of a lighter flicking. "Damn," he exhaled. "Didn't know he bailed on that. Thought your mom had that covered. Look, I'm dealing with some stuff right now. Liquidity's a little tight, you know." Madison blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means I ain't flush with cash at the moment, but I'll figure something out." "How soon?" He chuckled, like she was asking for a last-minute ride to the airport. "Soon as I can, Maddie. Might have to move some stuff around. Maybe talk to a guy I know." She hung up before he could finish the sentence. She didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, she texted her mom. "He doesn't have the money. You need to fix this." Carol read the message while standing in the wine aisle at Whole Foods. She blinked at it like it was a foreign language, then dropped a bottle of Chardonnay into her cart and walked straight to the customer service desk. She was still calm then, still convinced this was a clerical error. Back home, she logged into the joint account. It was empty. Not low. Empty. She tried the savings next. Blocked. Tried the college fund she assumed still existed. Frozen. Then she opened the envelope that had come 2 days earlier but sat unopened on the kitchen counter. An account closure notice from their investment manager. As per your husband's authorization, all funds have been successfully dispersed to private accounts. This concludes our management of the Randall family portfolio. Her hands went numb. The Chardonnay bottle rolled off the counter and shattered. She called the number at the bottom of the letter. It rang 3 times, then disconnected. Not even voicemail. Somewhere across the city, a tow truck operator was loading a pearl-white BMW 3 Series onto a flatbed in front of the campus dorms. Students gathered with phones, whispering. Someone said, "Isn't that Maddie Randall's?" Someone else snapped a picture. Inside the car, on the passenger seat, was a copy of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. A gift from me. The bookmark still tucked between pages 142 and 143. Madison arrived seconds too late. She sprinted barefoot from her apartment building in pajama pants and a hoodie, phone in hand, waving like she could undo the steel chains already wrapped around the tires. Wait, that's my car. The driver didn't even look at her. He climbed into the cab, flicked a switch, and pulled away. She stood there, stunned, arms hanging limp. No car, no tuition, no scholarship, no answers. Just a screen full of unread messages, a voicemail box full of silence, and a truth creeping in around the edges like a slow fog. There was no real family. There was no fallback. There was only a fantasy, held together by one man's quiet generosity, now withdrawn. And now? Now there was nothing. By Monday morning, Carol had officially lost her composure. She called me 6 times before 10 a.m., each voicemail more cracked than the last. The first 2 were polite, performative, like she still thought this was all some passive-aggressive phase. "Hey, John, just checking in. There's a billing issue with Madison's tuition. I'm sure it's just a mix-up. Give me a ring when you get a sec, okay?" 2 hours later, the tone had changed. "John, this is serious. Her enrollment is at risk. You know how hard she's worked. Please don't do this. Just call me." By voicemail 4, her voice trembled. "Madison's panicking. We both are. I know you're upset, but you always said she was like your own. You said you'd never abandon her." Voicemail 6 wasn't even coherent. Just muffled sobbing, then the call dropped. Madison, for her part, sent a single text. "You always said I was your girl. Why are you doing this?" I stared at that message from the cabin porch, watching mist roll off the ocean like smoke from a slow-burning fire. I didn't reply. Didn't need to. The silence was the reply. They weren't looking for me because they missed me. They were looking for the man who kept the machinery running. The one who filled the gas tank while they revved the engine in someone else's name. When they realized I wasn't responding, they drove to my office downtown. Carol had the gall to bring a tray of muffins. Blueberry, my favorite. As if carbs could cancel betrayal. But when the receptionist told her I'd cleared out last week, left the keys, vacated the lease, and didn't leave a forwarding address, her face apparently went slack. She asked to use the bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the toilet for 15 minutes without moving. Meanwhile, Madison checked my LinkedIn. Last update, 6 days ago. Stepping away from corporate consulting for personal reflection. She opened my old business email. Deactivated. She called the HR department at my firm. "I'm sorry," they said. "John Randall no longer works with us. Best of luck." They weren't just confused now. They were afraid. Not of violence. I was never the screaming type. Never the door slammer. Never the tantrum kind of man. But they were realizing something far worse. I hadn't just walked out of the house. I had vanished. No breadcrumbs. No trail. No angry manifesto left on the kitchen counter. Just absence, total and clean. No man. No money. No future plan. The man who used to wake up at 5:30 to shovel snow from the driveway before Madison's 7 a.m. classes? Gone. The man who used to leave little notes in her laptop bag during finals week that said, "You've got this, am proud of you always?" Gone. The man who watched them mock him, then smiled through it, Because he thought love meant endurance? Gone. And for the first time in a very long time, they were forced to see me not as a permanent fixture, but as a man who could choose, like anyone else, to stop being used. They looked for me in all the old places, but they never once looked in the mirror. The call came just after sunrise. I was sitting on the porch of the cabin with a chipped mug of coffee, watching the tide roll in and erase yesterday's footprints. The gulls were screaming over some dead fish carcass down by the rocks, and I was debating whether I cared enough to move. The phone I'd left on airplane mode all week. I turned it on just long enough to check for emergency work pings. That's when the call came through. Unknown number. Connecticut area code. I let it ring once. Twice. I almost declined it, but something told me to listen. I answered with silence. "Mr. Randall?" A voice asked, measured, formal, practiced. "This is Dean Morgan from Hawthorne University. I appreciate you taking the call. I know this is an unusual circumstance." Still, I said nothing. He cleared his throat. "We've been trying to get in contact with you regarding your daughter's tuition account. Madison Randall. There appears to be an outstanding balance of—" "She's not my daughter." Silence on the line. "I is sorry. She's not my daughter," I repeated. Calm. Even. Like I was stating the weather. "Well, I understand, biologically, of course, but from what we understand, you've been the primary financial sponsor. For years, in fact. That was before she decided I wasn't her family anymore." He paused, like he was trying to figure out if this was some legal gray area he should tiptoe around. "Mr. Randall, I don't mean to intrude." "Then don't." The silence that followed wasn't polite anymore. It was stunned. I could feel him wrestling between his administrator instincts and his human discomfort. Finally, he tried a softer tack. "Look, we're just trying to find a way to keep her enrolled. Perhaps there's been a miscommunication." "There hasn't." I exhaled. "She made her choice. He can pay for her future now." A long pause. Then, "Mr. Randall, may I suggest?" Click. I set the phone down face first on the table like it had said something foul. The tide had crept up further by then, drowning half the rock I'd been staring at all morning. The gulls were gone. Nothing but the sound of surf and the creak of old wood beneath me. It didn't feel triumphant. Not in the Hollywood way. It felt like cauterizing a wound. A clean burn. Necessary. Final. Somewhere, the dean was probably staring at his phone, blinking, unsure what just happened. Madison might have been pacing her dorm in socks, hoping her backup savior would come through. Carol was likely already drafting another tear-soaked apology, laced with just enough manipulation to make it feel like love. But the message had been delivered. Not shouted. Not screamed. Just said plainly, "I'm not your father anymore." And the line had gone dead. The fallout didn't begin in the bursar's office or with the car being towed. It started in a dorm room, 3 doors down from Madison's, where a girl named Lindsay finally had enough of hearing her complain about daddy issues while borrowing her hairdryer. Lindsay wasn't a close friend, more of a classmate, an observer. But she had ears, and she had Wi-Fi. And most importantly, she had a petty streak. The post went live around midnight. Imagine this. Girl ditches her stepdad after he pays her way through an Ivy League school, buys her a BMW, and stays up helping her through panic attacks. Now she's broke, dropped from the scholarship, and begging the real dad who doesn't even answer her calls. Karma's fast. Triangular flag, triangular flag, triangular flag. A few people saw it, laughed, and moved on. But then someone commented, "Wait, are you talking about Madison Randall?" That cracked the dam. Someone else chimed in with a screenshot of Madison's now-deleted post. New start with real family dizzy sparkling heart. Another posted the photo of the BMW mid-repo, the yellow sticker flapping like a flag of surrender. It spiraled from there. By lunchtime, it had spread across campus. Then it jumped to Reddit. r/college drama picked it up under the title. Stepdad pays for 3.5 years, gets ghosted, stops paying. Daughter shocked when money runs out. The top comment had 22,000 upvotes in under 6 hours. He raised her. She used him. Now she's learning who actually loved her. People began digging deeper. Someone found old photos from her high school graduation, me in the back row, clapping like an idiot, holding the stupid bouquet she said she didn't want but secretly loved. Another unearthed a tweet from Madison's old account. My stepdad is the most solid man I've ever known. Biological dads are overrated. The internet doesn't forget. It only waits. Someone commented. She upgraded her benefactor, then got surprised when the original one closed his wallet. Another. Imagine replacing a man who showed up every day with a guy who showed up twice a decade. Darwin Award of Emotional Intelligence. Even the girls in her sorority started turning. One of them posted a now-deleted Insta story that said, "When your fairy tale turns into a GoFundMe." The judgment wasn't gentle. It wasn't even fair, always. But it was loud. Madison stopped going to class. Carol shut down her Facebook after getting bombarded with private messages ranging from schadenfreude to threats. And through it all, I said nothing, posted nothing, replied to no one. I watched the circus from my cabin window, waves crashing like applause in the distance. It wasn't revenge I felt. It wasn't pride. It was clarity. For years, I'd been the silent investor in a rigged emotional pyramid scheme. And the moment I pulled my support, the whole illusion collapsed, not because I wanted it to, but because it was never built to stand without me. Now the world was seeing it too. And for the first time in a long, long while. They weren't looking at me like the fool. The first message came in at 4:12 a.m. Madison, I was wrong. I miss you. I need your help. No punctuation. Just that flat, quiet desperation. The kind that doesn't know how to sound sincere anymore because it never had to be. 2 hours later, another came. Please. I don't have anyone else. I messed up. Then came Carol's turn. A long message. Too long. The kind you write when you're not sure where the begging ends and the manipulation begins. It started with soft words. You were always the strong one. We took you for granted. Then eased into the weaponized nostalgia. Remember the weekend trips? When she called you dad and meant it. You can't just throw that away. Funny. I hadn't. They had. I sat barefoot in the cold sand, the wind sharp enough to sting my ears. The tide was rolling in again, same as it had the first day I arrived. Constant. Cleansing. The gulls circled and screamed like little winged jurors arguing over a verdict already decided. I opened my phone, not out of curiosity, but to confirm what I already knew. 10 messages. 6 from Madison. 4 from Carol. 1 missed call from a number I didn't recognize. Probably her sister, trying to be the ambassador of whatever shaky peace treaty they were constructing. I opened the first message. Not to read it, just enough to see the preview. The tone. I was a child. I didn't understand what you really did for me. Of course, she was a child, but not too young to pack up her things and announce that her real family was finally stepping up. Not too naive to know how deep the knife would go when she twisted it with that smile and those hashtags. I scrolled through them slowly, deliberately. My thumb hovered over the reply button for a second, just long enough to register the weight of choice. Then I hit select all. Delete. No drama. No rage. Just done. I turned the phone back off and slid it under the beach towel beside me. The sun was starting to rise, painting the sky with that burnt orange glow that makes even regret look romantic. But I wasn't mourning. I wasn't grieving. I was observing. Watching the end of a performance I'd unknowingly funded for years. The curtain had fallen. The audience was gone. The actors were broke. And the man they'd once directed the spotlight toward was now just a shadow on a quiet coast, unbothered. They thought I'd left because I was hurt. Truth was, I stayed too long. I'd already grieved the loss the day she smiled and said, "He's not your daughter." Everything after that was just the long, slow burn of exit strategy. And now? The door wasn't just closed. It was sealed, bolted, brick by brick, with memory as mortar. I let the tide come up and soak the hem of my jeans. Didn't flinch. Some things are worth losing. Some silences are worth keeping. It took weeks, but eventually, even Carol realized the paperwork wasn't just symbolic. She marched into the financial advisor's office on a Wednesday, heels clicking, that faux confidence armor she wore like perfume. She was ready to charm, demand, and, if needed, cry. The house, after all, was still technically ours, as she told her sister the night before. What she didn't expect was the advisor flipping open his screen, frowning, and tilting it toward her. "Ma'am, you're not on the deed. And neither is he." She blinked. "What do you mean neither is he?" It was moved into a trust. Irrevocable. Months ago. Her smile cracked. There has to be a mistake. There isn't. She tried to breathe, tried to argue, tried to spin some lie about temporary refinancing, tuition deadlines, a family emergency. The advisor just shook his head. No emotion, just policy, just consequence. Outside, she called the number she hadn't dared touch in weeks. Left a message between gulps of breath. John, I don't know what you did, but the house, everything, it's not in our name anymore. Please, just call me. We can fix this. We can figure something out. You don't have to be so cruel. Then the sob hit. Midward. That raw, unfiltered sound people make when they finally understand no one is coming to save them. She left 5 more voicemails that day. Madison tried again too. Just a single line. Can we talk? They didn't know where I was. I'd left no trail, no forwarding address. Just digital footprints slowly fading with each passing week. My office lease had been reassigned. My accounts rerouted. The world that once orbited around their convenience had gone dark. And me? I was walking a quiet coastal trail as the sun slipped low behind the cliffs, jacket zipped halfway, hands in my pockets, the air thick with pine and salt. My phone buzzed once. Then again. Then silence. I didn't look. I didn't need to. I knew what the messages would say. Knew the pattern. Guilt, nostalgia, desperation, bargaining. It was the same choreography, danced too late on a stage already dismantled. I stopped at a bench overlooking the surf, sat down, watched the waves shred themselves against the rocks below. For years, I thought strength meant staying, holding it together, covering the cracks with smiles and spreadsheets, making sure everyone else's life ran smooth, even if mine quietly crumbled beneath it. But now I knew better. I didn't ruin them. I didn't scream or expose or destroy. I simply left, and I let the weight of their own choices drag them into the hole they'd been digging while I paid for the shovels. The phone vibrated again. I turned it off, slipped it back in my pocket, and smiled, small, tired, but real, as the wind rolled over the cliffs and carried the last remnants of that life out to sea.